Now it is 5:13 p.m. for me and Brandon. I do believe for you, Drake, it's 7:13.
No, I'm an hour behind, so
Oh,
it's
oh, right. Okay,
yeah,
4:13.
whatever that is.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go. So right.
Or wait, no, I'm dumb. I don't know what time it is. It is 7:13.
Okay.
I
There
don't
you
know. When you're in this vocal booth, it's like a little time capsule, kind of my
go.
little
Yeah.
hyperbolic time chamber.
Right. No, it definitely follows alongside that time capsule idea we had before. It's like, yeah, that room is literally the time capsule for this podcast session. But right. So again, for us, it's 5:13. For Drake, it is indeed 7:14 p.m. now. Is the 24th of March. It is a Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon. We just listened to Parasitic Embodiment's Wrought in Eternity, which I'm not sure if that was a play on words or if I'm saying that correctly. Am I saying that correctly?
It is a play on words. It's part of what the concept in a nutshell.
Okay.
I'm really big on dichotomies and also words with dual meanings, and this is kind of both. So rot can mean to be brought forth or to be birthed in a
Ooh,
religious context. So
okay.
you could rot. Most people when they read it, they're gonna think, did he mean rot? Which rot in eternity more brings to mind, hell, where well, if you're birthed in eternity, that more brings to mind something positive. So it's supposed to have both paths
I like that.
available within the title,
Right. There's a sense of
essentially.
duality with it too.
Yeah,
That's
definitely. It's
that's
like a good
really
evil
cool.
type thing. Yeah,
Hell yeah.
thank you.
Well, yeah, of course. Um, gotta appreciate good concept writing, good depths, right? As opposed to making your album into a shallow pool of lyrical context. Instead, like I said, you have an Olympic swimming pool, dude, even with just the
No,
fucking album. No?
no, him. He's pretending like he has shallow writing, but he
Oh.
he he has the most. He's trying so hard to be a shallow. He couldn't be one if he tried. So it's like,
No, he's right though. You literally bring an Olympic swimming pool. So
Oh yeah. And I'm
yeah.
I'm glad to kind of, if nothing else, summon some appreciation, conjure some appreciation for those depths because we don't have that enough in the counterculture music world aside from major acts like Silent Planet, which, well, that's why they're my favorite band of all time, is because they have those Olympic swimming pools worth of lyrical depth and knowledge, insight in their songs that sometimes even compel you to do research projects or look into certain conspiracy theories. But that's besides the point. Welcome, everybody, to the Anatomy Podcast,
uh,
the underground deep counterculture music's best documentary podcast since at least April 21st of 2021. Now, with this being episode 73, we have at least reached around the world a couple times, and I'm grateful for every single opportunity that I've had so far, whether with bands like To the Grave from Australia, Makhluk from Jakarta, Indonesia, Miss Mata, which is basically the Lorna Shore of Malaysia, and I'm
I
looking
need to
forward
hear
to,
that.
yeah, really good shit. And they even did To the Hellfire live at like a Malaysian music festival, which I think was really really cool because, well, bands and people who love music in that part of the world, they don't really get access to that. They don't exactly have major festivals coming through town. Um, let's see. So what are some other bands we've talked with? Seeing Things from Czechoslovakia, No Face No Case from Prague. Um, let's see.
Awaken Providence.
Awaken Providence. Exactly. Love the boys in Awaken Providence. Gotta love all the freaking Unique Leader Records bands that we have happened to host on this podcast so far. It's
Distant.
distant.
That's
Exactly.
crazy.
Yeah, seriously. You're telling me, bro. And like, that was one of the first ones I did. That's what caught me off guard. I'm like, okay,
I
okay.
know that was a really
Excited.
early one.
Yeah. And I have yet to get, I really want to get, of course, all the boys, Elmer. I want to get Elmer Maritz back on. But of course, I also want to get Alan on. That way we can talk not only about his vocal efforts, but like what he does as far as logo creations for Almanac Designs. He's done plenty of
I
logos.
didn't know he did that. That he
Yeah,
was a logo guy.
he's a really good logo guy. Um,
Yeah.
he
He
did
does a lot of concept stuff too in his
exactly,
albums.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, some popular logos that he's done, I think by now, obviously Distance, one of them, which is like, you gotta love making your own band's logo. He made the Waste logo as of recently.
Okay.
He did Abyss Above's logo. He just has a very iconic, like messy but still edgy graffiti-esque deathcore aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's always cool to see, simply said. And then he does photography on the side too. So of course, getting all creative mediums and associating them with the personality and then hosting that, providing a platform, and they're like, hey, this guy does photography and logos. If you want to get a logo done, please inquire with him because he's really good.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know. No,
Exactly.
you know, but
Exactly, bro. And
now I do.
there you go. So needless to say, shout out to all of the Century Media Records artists that we've hosted, the Unique Leader Records artists, the Rising Empire artists, starting with For the Fallen Dreams, which again, like so big right off the start.
Yeah, that's wild.
Star
What's up?
said, shout out Inherited Suffering.
Oh yeah. Shout out Inherited Suffering because of the the boys in Invirulant.
And now CKB.
Yeah,
Make the
CKB.
Gauntlet.
Exactly. Gangrenous Flesh Consumption too. We've been trying to do them for a long time, and they're from Inherited Suffering. So
I really like that album that they came out with. I think was it last year?
yes, sir.
But,
Really good
yeah.
album. One of the best slam albums that came out last year. And then last but not least, of course, Reality Fade Records. They are doing incredible things for the scene, even if, for example, they are. That's right. They are, because we more or less had a conversation, me, Brandon, Derek, and Tristan, hosting bands like A Pretext to Human Suffering, which we've hosted, Shrine, which I'm hoping to host in the future, as they attempt to make their comeback. Vile Impregnation, definitely.
One of my favorites for sure.
Yeah.
Tristan was in that. In Envy.
Did you see
he was on bass.
Interview?
What's up?
What's that?
Sean, did you see the Fluids interview?
No.
Dude, that shit is so funny with Mavizzle. You need to listen to the Fluids times Mavizzle album. They did this like parody horrorcore album where like Walter Hale and is it Jan or Yan? They basically are like, we're gonna go super like 90s, like this is gonna sound like these beats are gonna be hard as fuck, and they were, and then Mavizzle just came in and just like ruined the album on purpose, and it's awesome.
Okay, you'll definitely have to link me that, boys. Because I'm constantly reaching out to new artists, and now Instagram's like recommending me not only deathcore artists, but like really anti-government, like authentic bluegrass level country artist. Like what the fuck? But like in the best of ways, because of them.
Nice.
Let's see, what is it? There's like, what the fuck is it? It's like Smoke Grass or something like that. I just found them today. Like I woke up, went through Instagram, because of course we do that today. That's basically our newspaper for today. Because I'm getting older. What is it? I know you're in here somewhere. Shadowgrass. Really good. Just like, I don't know. There's something really
everyone wants to punch Derek, but they also love him. So I think it's just comes with the territory.
Right. So
And,
shout out to Derek Ryan.
Shout out to Derek Ryan.
My gangsta boo.
You were saying, Brandon?
Oh, I was just gonna say at the Break and Blast Fest that we played with Deso, 2 weeks, I don't know, a month ago, something like that. I asked one favor of the crowd, not like a cool, crowd split or anything like that, or a wall of death, but like everyone yelled, "Fuck you, Derek," and they all, like the whole crowd, everyone, "Fuck you, Derek," and oh man, it was.
It sounds great. And
that's basically somehow I don't know how, Derek, that's like saying you love him too in a way at the same time. You can't defeat him.
It is. That's our whole thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I forgot where we last left off. I'll do apologies, gentlemen. But
where did we leave off last?
we were talking
I feel like we were talking about a band
you had on.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mentioned you should get Fluids on because I'm sure it would be.
Yes.
Oh, the Maz, yeah,
Okay.
Mavizzle times Fluids.
So
Fluids is like one of my favorite bands. I collect all their stuff. So
really,
yeah, I have a dumb big Fluids collection that my wife is just disgusted by. But
okay, Putrid Stew and Fluids have collabed. Okay, I see them. I see them. I've been I think I listened to a split EP between Putrid Stew and Peeling Flesh recently. That was like a
yeah, Putrid Stew is the drummer from Sangua Suga Bugga Bugga. It's like his like solo project.
Gotcha.
Very talented guy.
Okay. So Fluids jumped on, what was it? Like you guys, we were talking about that release where someone purposely ruined an album. Was that Fluids or was that another artist jumping on the record to ruin it?
Fluids is normally like a death metal, like death grind. They have all these samples of like cartel killings and like things that happen in real life that are like incredibly provocative and untasteful.
Yeah.
But they also kind of make you think because it's like, oh
perspective.
Shit. So then they out of nowhere come out with this album, like I said, like a horrorcore parody, like super good beats, and then this Mavizzle character, who's not the vocalist for Fluids in general, came on there and he's just spewing like the most like horrible asinine things where he's playing all these different personas where he's just trying to be as like creepy and douchey as possible. And your average listener is going to be absolutely appalled by it, but if you like get it, it's like, oh man, that's hilarious, you know.
Right.
But yeah,
it's kind of like truly authentic shock humor, like The Dictator as a film, but compressed into a death grind album or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially.
And this is an album that Fluids released. I'm still catching up, apparently.
Yeah. I think they released that one in, I don't know if that was in 23. I think they have a lot of splits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Full
lengths.
Yeah, in 2023 they released American Picarist XXX.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And I mean, there are 11 tracks in this one too. So, well, here's to hoping we can get them on eventually, because this actually looks funny as shit. And I have yet to sample any of their music, but ain't that the beauty of getting them on the podcast? This is just listen to it in the moment if we can manage to reach them.
It's an acquired taste. You might not like it, but
I mean, bro, I live to find new levels of like shock and awe and just like, what the fuck is this? You know,
I brought it up
if you don't
in terms of cool interviews, because the interview itself is done through like a talk box,
a vocoder, like
okay,
like it sounds like an AI chat. This was before Mavizzle joined, and he's just like, what is this shit? And then they ultimately ended up teaming up. But yeah,
nice. Okay. Well, I mean, if anything too, I guess while we're on the segue of just like kind of looking back, or at least I'm looking back and just appreciating the opportunities I have already gotten. I'm very, very excited to be having a green light, no specific date, whether month or day, weekday or weekend. But I will be getting Esophagus, and apparently Esophagus managed to recruit Don Chapman from Waking the Fever. So I'm really,
I have mixed feelings on that, but I really like Don, but I'm hoping he has a Predator he's implementing that he cooked up, because Esophagus without Predators, I don't care if you're Jesus Christ yourself, it's not. He's got so
fair.
We'll see how that goes. It won't suck. It better be Esophagus still.
It has to be on brand.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I mean, Waking the Cadaver 2 would be cool, but yeah, we want to keep the
yeah.
No, I mean, dude,
man.
I've been wanting Waking the Cadaver on my show for a long time, because especially with projects like them, Cranium, now Party Cannon, which absolute homies, love them. Um, with them now,
Album art is crazy for that new one.
yeah.
So good.
With all of them now joining uniquely to records, it's like I'm already friends with so many bands on that record label, and I've hosted so many bands on the show from that label. It's like, well, now it feels like a checklist at this point. Like I have to kind of get every band that's on that label on my podcast eventually, because well, that makes the podcast the home of the heavy as well, and not the home of fucking, well, like I don't even want to use the word sellout, but like, I don't know. I just want it to feel
It's
like what's
You're
up?
the home.
Oh yeah, I can only hope. I can only hope. I've been working a long time, networking for a long time, just to be like, yeah, Sean Cross. He's that weird 6-foot little guy from, you know, who talks with most of the uniquely to records bands. Like that's kind of the goal. But you know, there's also obviously all those other labels we mentioned before. But as we kind of reground and think more upon the moment at hand, right? This session, again, is for Parasitic Embodiment. We more or less have a structure for the Anatomy podcast, but just wanted to take a moment to appreciate all the opportunities beforehand. So now we dive into the people part of the podcast. And well, with this session in mind, as far as members of Parasitic Embodiment officially, basically we want to start out by telling Drake's story, day and night, just kidding. Starting off, I'm not sure if I sent you the questionnaire. Did I, Drake?
You did, and I skimmed through it a couple times just to kind of get an idea. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I didn't like get anything rehearsed or nothing. I just want
Right.
to have kind of a loose idea. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
So, you know, utilizing the structure for what it's worth, what I sent over for what it's worth. Thank goodness I have the TAP inquiry email on a separate tab. That way I don't have to spend 10 minutes improvising commentary while I look for this document. I think it'd be too obvious with time. But part one, the people part of the podcast, the many P's that have, you know, like a fucking gun.
Lots of P's.
Lots of P's. Lots of P's and Q's.
Yep.
But we have question one, and this is technically not really a question, but 10 to like basically we're looking to have you introduce yourself. And this first little segment, this first little chunk of time, maybe like 5 minutes or so, what I want you to do is introduce yourself as if you're presenting yourself before a class, maybe whether it be elementary, junior high, high school, whatever the fuck. Provide your first impressions, provide a brief introduction, your name, the role you have in the band, where you are currently based. Not asking for your address history, you know, study, because that would be mean to dox you like that. Asking for the city you're currently living in, and maybe something you like to do outside of music.
Okay. So I'm Drake. I'm in Minnesota.
Oh shit.
I work at a school. I clean. I'm a janitor. And then I'm first and foremost a husband and dad to 4 kids.
Jesus.
So all this music stuff is just it's something I have to do to feel, you know, kind of complete for my own, I guess, whatever, ego and self-confidence. And I just enjoy making music. But it's at the end of the day, it's another compartment. It's a hobby. And I'm mostly just doing the family grind. I don't do a whole lot outside of that. I'm mostly a homebody. I just kind of hang out, do stuff with the family on the weekends, occasionally hang out with friends here and there. So with Parasitic Embodiment, it ended up being I have a buddy, Casey Hadley, which shout out to Casey. He's got it's like spelt like I think it's CHT got banned. Sorry if it's not right, but it's a YouTube on YouTube. Look that up. And he does all sorts of stuff. He's a car gearhead. He does like vehicle vlogs on, I think he has some vehicle they love from the 90s. He's super into the E30s, E40s, I don't know. But anyways, main thing is I found him because he uploads breakdown compilations, and he finds all these bands in the underground and big bands alike, and he will go into albums sometimes. I don't know if he still does this, but he used to go in and he would cut out all the breakdowns. So I found him probably in like 2010 through that YouTube channel because he uploaded Thy Art Is Murder, the Adversary breakdowns, which is an insane video. That was them at their peak, in my opinion. And then from there, we kind of bullshitted over the years, talked deathcore, because he's a deathcore head through and through. He doesn't like slam, death metal, anything. He's like a core dude. So he's one of those homies. And basically he hit me up one day. He has this other buddy, Andrew. Andrew's worked in the past with, I don't know if you know, I think it's Andrew Patterson. He was and Hell Followed With vocalist for that Chimerical Reality EP, I think it was.
Okay.
So those two used to jam like, whatever it was, 8 years ago, whatever the deal was. And so that was a little bit of his background, and he was looking for a slam vocalist to do for a joke project in the vein of Infinite Annihilator's first album, like with super guttural vocals, and he wanted it to be not serious. And I'm like, okay, well, I hit him up because Casey Hadley was like, hey, this guy needs a slam vocalist. So that's how we met, was through my buddy Casey. So shout out to Casey. The album wouldn't be here without him. Sometimes you meet people just in a random Xbox, whatever the deal is, and you think nothing of it, and you might be making a full 3-hour podcast about, whatever, an album you made because of it 10 years later. So that's pretty crazy how that works sometimes.
Right.
But then Andrew hit me up eventually. He had me do a guest feature for his other band, Flesh Marauder.
Oh, okay.
And then he did an album with the same vocalist, Ryan English, for the first Parasitic Embodiment album. And then basically I approached him. I'm like, you need a slam vocalist? He's like, yeah, but not yet. And then fast forward later, he's like, hey, I want you to actually join Parasitic Embodiment, and let's do that idea. Because the first Parasitic Embodiment album's like very MySpace core, like kind of like throwaway lyrics, just like supposed to be very tongue-in-cheek and like almost humorous.
Yes.
Well, once I started listening to the material, like almost like you said, something more colorful. And that, I think that was Andrew's intent initially with this album. But once I sat down and started doing it, it just came out how it came out. And thankfully he was still behind it. But yeah, that's essentially how I ended up as the vocalist of this particular band. But I've been doing vocals. I probably started doing them. I think I can specifically remember I was with my buddy Eric skateboarding, I think in 7th grade, and I was listening to Miasma, A Vulgar Picture by the Black Dahlia Murder.
Okay.
And I tried to do his lows, and it came out. It just came out like, I was like, whoa, I did it, And so then I just leaned into that and kind of then got more into slam, came back to deathcore later. So I ran the gauntlet, learning, screaming along to, I was the guy at the parties that would steal the aux cord and play metal and get hammered and do covers of Butcher the Week and Abominable Putridity in the End of Human Existence, Uterovaginal by Cephalotripsy, like all the iconic slam albums was where I really cut my teeth vocally. And then I was very opposed to deathcore, even though I kind of started off on some core stuff. I was kind of one of those elitists. And then I think in like my senior year, a buddy of mine turned me on to Chelsea Grin, Desolation of Eden.
Okay.
And then from there, I moved on to like the Red Shore. The only deathcore band I'm actually wearing it that I really was
Through the Eyes
into
of the Dead, yeah.
what was, yeah, like while I was with the slam stuff, but there Through the Eyes of the Dead is very like death metal based first and foremost with deathcore elements. So then I started learning how to do highs by screaming along to the first two Chelsea Grin records, all the Damien and Jamie Hope stuff from the Red Shore, like Unconsecrated and like the demos and stuff. So that I expanded a lot there, and I formed my Enunciated Low on Through the Eyes of the Dead's album Malice. That's where I spent a bunch of time learning that main low. And yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of background history. Fast forward in the last year or two, I learned how to do the polys and all the stuff everyone's doing now so that I can keep up with the kids,
Yeah,
so to
stay
speak.
relevant.
But yeah, my heart's kind of in old school slam and like 2000, like 6 through 12 deathcore.
That's
So
fair. Yeah, that's completely fair. And it's like, how old are you?
I'm 31.
31, exactly. So I'm only 24. You got a bit more years on me. So naturally speaking, you can definitely connect with people like Finn more, just because of just the more history, the more time that you've had with the scene. Um, and it's always interesting getting to know more and more and more people, really, as just the podcast continues, who have been involved in death metal, deathcore, metallic hardcore, slam, grindcore, all the fucking cores, all the slams, all the blast beats, death metal, beatdowns, whatever. You guys have been here and you've been in this scene, making your mark, learning the big names, learning the big faces, and where you need to get your music as soon as possible. You guys have had a lot more time than I've had. And it's ironic because it seems that with what I'm trying to accomplish, one can't help but to think that they got here way too late. It's just kind of late to the race, per se. But
you kind of did,
yeah,
honestly. You really missed some really cool stuff, but then the same can be said. You're also in an amazing time because everyone's good. There's so much stuff,
yeah,
but it's so much to sift through. Yeah. And it sucks because sometimes you try to go back and listen to these classic albums, and if you didn't grow up with them, it's like anything. Like when I try to go listen to some of the death metal albums from the 90s and stuff that people just worship, and it's like, yeah, I like some of them, of course, but it just doesn't, it's not there, the
yeah,
connection. So yeah, I would still say though, metal's in a really good spot right now. There's almost too much,
yeah,
so it's like you
exactly.
can't keep up.
Exactly. But that's the ironic part about trying to get quote 144 bands, artists, relevant personalities on this show, let alone just involved with my own stuff. Just doing that homework, getting involved on an international scale. There's only so much you can do. There's only so much time that you can invest before you start becoming a shut-in, before you start working even a remote job from home, which is what I'm doing right now. It was really my peak form back in 2021, 22, when I was just working from home, listening to an EP or an album every morning. And that's how basically I have this really annoying subscriber to video ratio of maybe 920 videos to 926 subscriptions. It's so bad. Could be worse, of course, but it's just funny to look back on that and to understand that because of the homework that I've already done, it's like there's still so much work to be done. There's still so much research and so many albums to listen to, so many bands to get to know. And I'm like, bro, I'm 24. I wish I had the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I even feel that way, you know, and it's like, yeah, you're like got like 6 more years of stuff, and it just, the more years go by, the more material is released per year as opposed to before too.
Exactly. And with people also, if I may add this in, it's kind of it's almost discouraging how more people now are more intrigued because of that almost overstocking, that it's like as opposed to a simple splash, right? And that being deep underground counterculture, your relative bands, your main bands releasing material every 3 years. Now it's like, no, we're gonna be releasing at least an album or EP every year. That way we can kind of keep up with the algorithm, and like their hair is all like,
Oh, the single game, man.
right,
Ugh,
gross.
gross.
I'm glad we agree upon that, but that's just the natural
Fuck that
way.
shit. You got to do it, but I don't like it.
Yeah, it's that's probably the most difficult part of the process for me, is that basically if you don't manage to release at least one song per year, and as you grow as a band, if that just means more money into production. Even if you grow, it's like, you think that's where it got easy? No, you're going to be investing more. It doesn't fucking matter how big you are, because you're going to want to invest into bigger producers, bigger mixing and mastering people, producers, engineers. You're going to want to invest more. So then, even if you do become big and start making really, really big jumps with your project, you start developing a following, you have people buying your physical merch. The flip side of the coin is the investments. And if you don't at least get one song out per year, whether with your main project or side project, or your trietary side project, or your quadritary side project, it's so fucking it can be.
It's the thing. Everyone has 4 projects now too.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
just overwhelming sometimes, really, just how much people have to do these days, because a lot of people want to be in a band. And I mean, that's cool. At least there is that traffic in the first place. Just like, you know what? I want to be in a band based off of and inspired by 4 fans of Angel Maker, Thy Art Is Murder, Aversion's Crown. Boom. Okay, cool. MySpace era deathcore. Let's see how good that does. It'll probably do really well, because a lot of people are tired of the same Lorna Shore to the Hellfire-esque breakdowns, followed by like all that shit, the vocal Olympics. But one can only ask themselves, how far is that actually going to get them, if so many bands are wanting to revert and go back in time to that music that they heard when they were a kid, as opposed to just listening to the albums that are already out.
yeah, I hope it does come back.
I do too, because
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, I missed out on all that. So how ironic would it be that it just ends up coming back anyways? Just like, yeah, we don't really care about all this new vocal Olympics, and just just continuing to push the envelope until there's like just actually there's no room for any more envelopes in the doorway. You know what I mean?
You have bands like thankfully, like a good example is like Crown Magnet, or however some
Crown
people
Ma-
say it different. But
I say Crown Magnetar.
yeah. So there he's doing almost that, his own version of that, like classic brute low, like Ages of War, Through the Eyes of the Dead.
Yeah.
That classic deathcore just sounds like a big fucking jack dude low almost, or like an ogre or something. And he's really not doing all the, like you said, the snort
Olympics
before the breakdown and all of the a big part of what's going on right now is deathcore is stuck in a particular vocal Olympic where it's becoming redundant, and it's all dudes doing fries doing it, where it all ends up sounding kind of the same then. So because fries are really sick, but they inherently have a certain pocket of enunciation in the low, the way people have the cadence and the way they say things, the way the vowel ends.
Yeah.
I like to call it the Dan Watson low.
Ooh, yeah.
That was peak, and to me that still sounds the best. And here we are, 10 years later plus, with a bajillion guys maining that low, and it almost kind of loses its meaning
Yeah.
at that point.
And that's why I'm going to piss so many people off, because, well, what I'm planning to do with Blind is basically go back to the beginning and make them suffer with like having deathcore heavies and shit, but also that haunting female vocal in the background or in the forefront, whatever. Vocal choirs. So everybody does a vocal. People be like, oh my God, it's like fucking Doom if it was a band. I'm like, yep, cool. Moving on. There's so much stuff that I'm wanting to experiment with, and not just to divert people away from all of those other bands. Like, oh my God, the two vocalist mechanic, how fucking unoriginal. Oh, because a lot of bands are making it work. Um, there's only so much you can do to try to distinguish yourself from the rest of the scene. So for me, it's like, well, do you want to listen to a band that is deathcore, that can be slammed sometimes, but also has its body snatcher, Kublai Khan, orthodox boundaries moments? It can be ambient, but fucking tough. Blackened, ambient, and tough. And that's the description James had for it at the very, very beginning of it. And I think that really works. And hopefully that will help it distinguish itself. So more or
That
less,
sounds sick.
I can only hope, man. I can only hope. We definitely do not plan to be the next. I am not planning to be the next Lorna Shore. And I want to provide this disclaimer early on. I want to break the ceiling as far as expectations with that sort of shit, though. Get this band to Royal Albert Hall for the heaviest band that has ever been there. Bring me the Horizon level, but fucking heavy, balanced. It should be great. So more or less, we were talking briefly about your legacy. We were talking about how you ended up getting into Parasitic Embodiment, and more or less Necrophobic Beatdown. Well, that'll be for a separate session, but I definitely am excited to dig into that as well when the time comes. Question 2, we more or less covered that already. How did you get into music? Who got you into music? How did they do it? And like, when did they get you hooked? And are they still around to take the credit? I do remember you mentioning a buddy of yours who more or less ended up getting you into the scene. And I think the only detail that I was not able to kind of pinpoint for myself is who that was. So can we provide a brief shout out to that person once more?
Well, where it really would have started becoming a metal fan, I think would have been, I was visiting my dad down in Oklahoma, and I was Headbangers Ball, and it was when Slipknot Duality would play over and over every morning. And with my step brother was really into metal. He's older than me by a few years. So I just remember sitting on the bed, both just like hanging on to the bedpost, just like headbanging like just a bunch of cringy little kids, and it's like, I think that's when it clicked. And then I was going to a youth group at the time where it sort of was a combination of things. They were really into the solid state stuff, like Norma Jean, Under Oath. So that was another, like, okay, that's another type of harsh vocal, not quite a different type of heavy as opposed to Slipknot. And then I'm trying to think of what I believe it would have been Cannibal Corpse I found on my own. And then that really was the aha moment. Biggest mainstream band leading into that, probably I was really into like Lamb of God during like As the Palaces Burn, Ashes of the Wake, Sacrament, those albums. And there was a Metal Blade CD compilation I somehow ended up with, or I don't think it was Metal Blade, it was Roadrunner, and it had Cradle of Filth, Medusa and Hemlock track on it from Nymphetamine, and then it had the Black Dahlia Murder, A Vulgar Picture. And I think between Cannibal Corpse and that, because that also had Make Them Suffer on it from Kill, but that was really, really the like, oh shit moment where I'm like, there's how many vocalists do these people have and stuff. Cattle Decapitation, like Humanure. I'm like, what's going on here? So like, who does the high and who does the low? and then you find out it's all the same guy.
Yeah.
I think that to me was that's the thing about metal vocals is you can almost have, you know, if you're singing, yeah, you can sing differently, but you can have all these almost like you could imagine them as different characters or personas and stuff.
Exactly.
So it's almost like voice acting in a sense. So yeah, that would be as a whole the little checklist of like, okay, that nudged me, and how it all came together. You know, yeah, it. I think by time that Roadrunner, then I went out and bought As I Lay Dying, Shadows Are Security in 5th grade,
Okay.
and that was a really big one for me too. So,
oh yeah,
I would say that that was the basic background
there you
of
go.
what made me see it, at least.
Right.
So.
And question 3 in part 1 would be, quote, the scene. Part A of question 3 would be growing up as you got more into metal and rock, or possibly even other genres entirely. Did you have other people in school or in your local community who helped you push forward?
I would say quite the opposite, because our local music scene, I attended all of the shows. I still always went to them, but I think we had a metal show one time. It was during the Job for a Cowboy Doom craze, so it was like to them this novelty of a guy who could kind of pig squeal was really cool in like 2005 or whatever. But our scene was mostly punk, and then I would say like post-hardcore type stuff.
Yeah.
And they all thought bands like I specifically remember one time, because these guys would say be young adults, maybe in high school, whereas I'm in like 7th grade. And I was hanging out with them after a show once, all the bands, the local ones that are always playing every weekend, and they were just ripping on this kid who was like a nerd in their class, how they perceived him because he wore a Nile shirt. And they're like, that's the nerdiest, stupidest shit. And they just thought the vocals, everything. And at the time, I'm listening to Cannibal Corpse. I'm listening to Annihilation of the Wicked, like at the time in my spare time by Nile. And that was a moment where, so I was part of the music scene, but I was very much doing always my own thing. I just naively went to the show. So I would say my buddy Tyler Domagal, he was a couple years older than me, and he was really into like As Blood Runs Black, Allegiance, Suicide Silence, The Cleansing. So by time I was linking up with him again, childhood friend growing up, I had somebody to at least share it with. But throughout high school, I had a friend who was, you know, he was into it, but he grew out of it as an adult. But thankfully, I could bond with him. And but no, I basically did it all on my own, to be honest. I would find my buddy LR Schwartzel, shout out to Randall. I found him on Messenger probably in like 6th grade, and he's super into like black metal and like war metal and stuff. So he would show me some stuff, but no, everything everyone would show me wasn't what I was listening to typically.
Fair enough. Okay. And being that at least the people around you weren't into the same major bands, major projects, even major subgenres that you were into, since then, really, being that you're still, I would assume that you went to high school and all this happened, all these experiences, these recollections of your past, they did occur also in Minnesota, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Besides the one I mentioned in Oklahoma on a visit,
Right.
the Slipknot thing. Yeah, uh my mom divorced my dad, and this is where she grew up in Minnesota.
Gotcha.
So since I've been 2, so more or less my whole life. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
And even
Cold ass Minnesota.
yeah, even if there aren't any prominent people that you can recall, except for those 2 you just mentioned, from the local area that you were able to connect with, whether on social media or even in person, since then in Minnesota, and just kind of fine tuned to the algorithm that you participate in, right? The bands that you listen to. maybe every now and then you're like curious about what's going on in the local scene, so you keep up. I'm not completely sure. Are there any local heroes that are currently climbing the ranks in Minnesota that you know about?
Unfortunately, Minnesota is one of those odd states where there's really not a lot of notable metal bands from here. We have bands like After the Burial is probably the biggest I can think of. Reaping Asmodea is from here. Reflections is from here, I believe.
Shit. Okay.
And then yeah, for the most part, the scene here, there's a scene in Duluth and they're playing some deathcore stuff a little bit more in the kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It's not genty, but it's like that modern like like all that like syncopated like Meshuggah ripoff, but not Meshuggah stuff. And then there's a couple other random bands that's in the nearest city. So I go check out their shows and they're fun as fuck. They have a really good scene there. There's this band called Torment that's really kind of got, they're kind of like running that scene right now. So you know, they potentially could go some places. By the Thousands is from here, I believe.
Ooh, yes.
And they are about to go out on tour with Oceano, however you want to say it. So there isn't anyone, there unfortunately isn't any like particular slam bands, or I know there's some good black metal bands here, but I don't know names because I have.
All right, we're back. It has been it's been at least 20 or 30 minutes since we were last doing this podcast session. So needless to say, we really were digging into the people part of the podcast. We were talking with Drake about his story. We were telling everything that we could tell. I think we were digging into question 3, part B, talking about any local heroes that climbed the ranks. He mentioned After the Burial, Reflections. I think that's really where we left off. And then you were talking about Torment, which is a new local that's kind of like rising the ranks per se. So really that would be the placement or the placeholder for like, quote, are there any local bands that are currently climbing the ranks? Most likely you would say that would be Torment, correct?
I would say that I'm aware of in the nearest city to me. Yeah, they're doing really well for themselves. It's not really, that's the thing with Minnesota. I don't have any bands from it that really speak to me in particular. So it's kind of like, I like deathcore, but I the best I can find around here is deathcore I don't really vibe with. So, right. But they could be getting somewhere if they keep at it, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, they're putting the work in, and definitely one not to be surprised if you end up seeing at some point down the road, you know.
There you go. Let's see. Torment. I don't know if you can see this correctly.
Torment MN.
Oh, that might help.
Okay, yeah, cool. Well, when you unfortunately when you pick a really, you know, that's obviously been taken so many times. So
exactly,
they got to do something.
You got to provide more profile to it. Exactly.
Like the pale face Swiss.
Exactly. And I mean, still, nonetheless, as far as I'm concerned, like Kublai Khan, Texas. Let's see. There is, I mean, it's ironic too, because Cell, they don't really have to profile themselves as being from Oklahoma. They just do Cell and then parentheses from Oklahoma.
They got, yeah, that's some of those Peeling Flesh dudes in that one, I think.
Exactly. And we interviewed them recently. Really fun dudes to talk with. Really fun EP to listen to, The Unbearable Form, tough for short. So yeah, cool. We more or less definitely touched up upon any local buzz that might be going on near you. So we can go ahead and wrap up what is question 3. Question 4, I mean, you're a vocalist. I mean, I think the most you have to do with equipment would be with your own mic. But question 4 goes as follows. Are you a gearhead? Current setup? And what is your dream setup?
I'm a poser gearhead. I know a lot about guitars that and own a few that I don't have any business knowing about or playing because I can't actually play guitar very well. But I like bass. I think I have cheap ones at the moment. I used to run a Schecter Hellraiser for a 7-string. Now I just have like a Squire super cheap like $200 6-string. I think it's a RTG. It's like the budget 5-string Ibanez, $400, and it's like anyone who touches it, and it's like the cerulean blue. But everyone who's messed with it is like, "What do you mean this one's only $400?" Like, it's a really nice feeling guitar. I've been really impressed with Ibanez's budget line of stuff. I haven't had any bad experiences yet, so I can vouch on that. And then I have an Ibanez Geo, which is like a short scale bass, which is really fun to shred on. You can't really play metal with it. But as far as my vocal setup, I have the basic bitch Karen Shure SM7B, the Scarlett 2x2, the Cloud Lifter, because I got the OG Shure. They just came out with a new one. Essentially, from what I understand, the only real difference is there's a built-in Cloud Lifter now for the new SM7B. But I do have a Behringer XR Air 16 that I should probably try to run my mic through to see if there's probably a little bump in quality with that interface. So yeah, my setup is I have a shitty MacBook Pro 2017 that my sister bestowed upon me. Shout out to my sister Aramy. And then that's what I've been recording with. I do plan on upgrading my PC setup hopefully next year. So kind of mentally trying to prepare for that, because for me, doing the family grind and stuff, these purchases can't be taken so lightly anymore. So yeah, I got it easy though as a vocalist, thankfully.
Yeah.
For my amp, for my bass, I think I have an Ampeg. I don't know the exact one. It's I think a 450 or 550 watt. But I like the Ampegs. Those sound cool. Pedals, I like to mess with muffs. I have muffs. I have the Russian Pie one. I have this really cool boutique pedal, a blower box, which is like a kind of a one of a kind fuzz pedal. So going back to fluids, I'm really into fluids bass tones. They kind of have this like maxed out Mortician, super fuzzy, overblown bass sound. So yeah, that's kind of my gear realm where I hang out.
Okay. And I mean, even if you don't end up meddling that much with gear, as so far you haven't provided the impression or stated that in Parasitic Embodiment or Necropholic Beatdown, I was about to say Necrothug and Beatdown.
Could be.
Right? Seriously. With that in mind, it's like you don't end up experimenting that much with gear, except with your mic or except with the like Scarlett Focusrite that you'll have to channel your vocals through. That way you can get it into Reaper or whatever DAW you end up using. But right now, despite the responsibilities and the obligations, being a husband, being a father outside of Parasitic Embodiment and Necropholic Beatdown, are there any dream devices that you're looking to add to your collection? Or maybe because you are as uniquely articulated as you are you wanting to do experimentation with your vocals in the future to add more profile and kind of expand upon what is already a really well marketed vocal spectrum?
So far as experimenting with stuff, I'm always open to new techniques. A lot of the ones that appeared on this album, or some of them I've only picked up. A lot of them Shobe taught me. I've only been doing for, you know, like anywhere from like I don't know, a year and a half to a few months. So I still got a lot left in the tank so far as techniques, I think. To me, I wouldn't have thought, the whole thing is other people pave the way first. So far as original sounds and whatnot, I feel like there's some that I've been able to concoct, even if it's just for a phrase or a certain particular scream or layer. But for the most part, I I wouldn't have thought vocals would be where they're at.
Right.
10 years ago, I didn't think like polys and all this stuff, like some people knew, like Shobe knew, like Travis Ryan, people like that knew. But at the scale it's at now, it's commonplace, all these absurd vocal flexes. And yeah, as they come, I like to try to learn them. I like to be able to be a versatile vocalist and whatnot. Also,
Right.
before I forget, with gear for live, I do a Shure Beta. I think it's 58. Is it 57 or 58?
87.
The Shure Beta.
Yeah, the betas. I think it's the beta 87, right?
Maybe, I don't know. I bought it so long ago that it's the one with the
Got
blue ribbon around
blue
it. It's
ring.
the
Yeah,
Carteroid.
yeah,
Like,
those are sick, dude.
yeah, it's the one Mitch Lucker used his entire career live.
Whoa.
Um, there's a bunch of, it's the one Tool uses. I looked up, um, there's a bunch of dudes that use it live. So
Ooh,
it's a
dude,
classic.
they make a wireless version of it now.
Do they? That might be
Yeah,
something to look
you
into.
gotta get that for your live setup, dude.
Yeah.
Those things make your highs sound extra like mountain liony, even without any
Ooh.
EQ. The highs on the beta are really dope. Hence, I mean, Mitch, I mean, his highs just shredded live, and
Yeah.
there's a little hint of that from the beta. It helps.
Okay. That's sick.
But what,
I
I
mean,
don't remember if there was another question.
oh, so more or less, I might have miscommunicated it, but like mainly I was asking about the technology, and for
Oh,
example,
what I want, if there's any dream thing. I
yeah,
need to learn not so much I need a new PC, and I want to learn, um instead of being so intimidated by it, I'm getting more ready and intrigued to take it to the next step of like, when the most thing is costs, is getting into mixing. So I want to deep dive that and figure out, you know, at that point what plugins do particularly, and like which ones I want, and to play with those. So from a gear standpoint, I'm mostly interested in like digital stuff.
yeah, right. And more or less, more specifically, as far as the tech, I was asking about like, what you're planning to experiment with vocally, and like how are like what new equipment would you want to acquire
I
to
see. I'm
maybe,
sorry.
yeah, you're good. um yeah, so if there was like any special toys that may, because I know, for example, Derek from Nithful, he loves when he's doing his creepy pasta narrations and stuff, he loves
Yeah.
to really give himself that COD Zombies like polyphonic undertone or whatever the fuck you want to call it. So more or less
Mhm.
that's what I was asking about, is if you were planning to do stuff similar to that in the future, as far as guaranteed, disclaimer, this is a thing, like manipulation, technological manipulation of your vocals, as opposed to trying to do all the vocal Olympic shit.
I feel like a lot of that stuff is happening behind the scenes. That's a lot of stuff that Shobe would be more in tune with, on what exactly he is using. But for the most part, um, I don't think, um, for my lows, I try not to have really too many effects for the most part. I like to, I don't really like to alter my voice. So no, there's no particular um pieces of gear or things I can think of. Um, I think one thing I'll throw one nugget out. A lot of people don't realize auto-tune isn't just like what you think of, like the pop rap auto-tune or the country.
Yeah.
There's different ways to use auto-tune, and it can make you to where it doesn't sound like auto-tune in the sense of what you think, but it can make you sound like a little bit better. Things like that. I'm open to certain things, like certain little corrections, things like that. I try to stay away from pitch shifting, but the times I don't know if it happens on this album at all. I think it does on one line I can think of. But for the most part, I try to stay away from that too. But if it is pitch shifted on something, it's typically to give it that obviously monstrous low.
You're really clean on all of this. Like I can play the raws right now if you want to hear them. Like, I pulled up the session while we were talking just to look at it and kind of.
Is anything pitch shifted? Am I dogging myself?
Oh yeah, you're tripping, dog. You're tripping.
Sick. So, well then no, I guess I don't really want to mess with. I like when dudes like him go in, like I said, and mess with like the actual EQ of your vocals, and then like get into multi-band stuff within that, because that's a lot of what you're hearing on these records. Of it's like, dudes will send you stuff back, and you're like, that's, like I don't sound that good, and it's like, I mean, you do, you just get touched up, to where it all comes together.
Yeah, there's some final polishing, and every now and then there's sandpaper that's used to kind of smooth everything out. Like that's just part of the process. But it's good to know that you, at least for the most part, because we were talking about doing multiple tracks, and you were talking about not wanting to overdo it, which vocalist to vocalist, and someone who's like just trying to be more raw and feel more authentic too, even in the production phase of getting music out into the world, right? I want to make sure that people don't get the idea that I'm like trying to layer upon myself 50 times. That way I sound like the perfect me or some shit, because that sounds so stupid. Or at least to me it does.
But traditionally, I mean, that's what you would do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You would want to do like these big productions so that you get these larger than life.
It's the classic. You think that if one thing is good, a lot more of it must be even better. That's not necessarily always the case. I'm traditionally trained in that classic stupid layering everything up a bunch, but then in recent records, I have people mixing me like Ryan Wechter with Necrophilic Beatdown, or like Shobe. Everything they're sent is 3 to 5 layers, no matter what. So they're the ones who have an ear and eye for it, be better than me. I'm not at that point yet where they can better than me what's gonna sound good. Like, where no, dude, you don't even need a layer here. You just need this one scream, and then it'll make this part where it layers back up. And it's like the trade-off. It depends too. It depends on how the nuance to the album. I mean, if you're on a traditional BDM album, it's going to be just kind of one thing the whole time. So it's all situational too.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to make something very clear, at least speaking for myself, and in case anybody's wondering, in case anybody ever like wants to listen through this podcast to kind of get like an early perspective on my intentions with Blind. I do it anyways, really. There's a big difference between doing one vocal take and doing one vocal playthrough, right? So for me, it's not exactly always guaranteed that you get through the entirety of the song in one go, in one breath, in one effort. But for me, it's like, at least with Blind, it's like I just want to make sure that because there might be 5 or 6 people in the band, maybe even 7. Who fucking knows? I don't think so, but who knows? I just want to make sure that everything feels more grounded and down to earth, and then kind of build up slowly and slowly ascend into the heavens as far as the production and the layering, vocally speaking. But that's just to provide a little bit of like perspective and my thoughts on that, whatever. So question 5 would be, what lessons have you learned as a person or musician, and how did those lessons drive you? Or how could they apply to others trying to accomplish what you've already accomplished as a vocalist, a musician, a husband, or even a father?
Like what have I learned as a whole through doing this whole music thing?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah. Like what are some important lessons that you've learned, and what would you want to like kind of pass the torch on?
I think a lot of these guys, before they get really commit, I wish I would have at times stopped and would think about, why am I really doing this? And there's a lot of people who aren't necessarily, they're doing it to appear for the myth, the legacy, which is cool. That's part of it. And that's how I always kind of viewed it, as this larger than life thing, where now that it's at this point where it's just a hobby, I guess you have to do it for yourself is the main thing. And I came to learn that, is that when I had, like I said, when you asked who influenced you growing up, when I look back and reflected, I realized it didn't matter. I've always deep down did this for me because I have to, and it doesn't matter what anyone else really thinks. So if people are doing it to get some kind of like outside affirmation, or some people need that, they need other people's admiration and certain things to feel like they succeeded. And for me, I let go of that a long time ago, and I've been finding more success just approaching this as a hobby that I really love to do, and trying to make it look as professional and be as professional as possible as a side hobby. And that just keeps opening doors for me. So I just think people need to really think about their motivations and intentions, because online you see so much bitterness and so much people getting pissed and disappointment. And I mean, there's so many of us trying to do this at this point, and we can't all be rock stars, you know?
No.
So, I don't know. I guess that's my tangent on it. Think about, why are you really doing this? And is it for, is it setting you up for failure for your mental health long term, or is it something that's good for you? And ultimately, with music, no matter what, it's going to be a bit of both. But what is it more of at the end of the day for you personally? So
I think that's
for
a very
me,
good thing to say.
it's a positive thing, because once I stop caring about what anyone thinks in general, like, I'm not just talking about music, I'm talking about in real life, family, friends that don't get it, they don't listen to this kind of stuff. You'll have all these people that are going to be like, what the fuck are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know, I guess I'm just being me. And it's like, you reach this point where if you can come to peace with that, then it's like the world and music is your oyster more so.
Exactly. Like,
Can I add a follow-up?
Yeah.
So what would you say, the same question that Sean asked, but narrowed specifically to doing this album and joining PE? Like, what would you say that you learned from that and that you would pass down to the next guy?
Well, that's a whole nother thing. For me, it was the entire thing with PE was putting off, it was the procrastination of never learning how to record myself, always having to rely on others for everything, which unfortunately I still have to do with a lot of this music stuff, because I'm only a vocalist, and I'm learning more things, that everything that comes with being in a band as it goes on. But learning how to record myself was a huge one, and realizing that not only was it not dreadful and intimidating. It was fun. It was like this relieving experience, cathartic almost, where it's like, you know, it just was an aha moment, a big booster. So if you're somebody who's sitting around pretending that you're gonna eventually, you know, I'm gonna be one of these band guys online, I'm gonna be able to throw my hat in, you gotta fucking do it, because otherwise people aren't gonna do everything for you. So for me, from that standpoint, and a big part of that was Shobe. Actually, he just learned how to record himself. Not probably, I mean, I got to watch him learning stuff, and then I really admire him, and we're on the same wavelength. So it was like, Shobe is the first person I finally had. It's online, but it's like, he influences me. He's someone I look up to. So I'm like, if he can do it, I can do it. And the way he would explain it to me was very like, it made it not seem scary anymore. So that was a big part of it. And then vocally learning to record yourself, I have a lot to learn still with that stuff. And there's a lot of room for improvement, but I got to learn a lot of things. You got to think, you're on other people's time when they're recording for you. I have multiple releases out that are whatever the take was, that was it. I didn't get to just sit there, and some of these things were just ideas in my head, and I do them out loud. They might not be exactly what I thought it was going to be, but it was whatever it really was. And I didn't have as much of a say in it. So now when you can sit down and have the tush time and really like, for me in Minnesota, I don't have a heated garage, and my house isn't big enough to have a dedicated room, so I'm a little bit limited. But yeah, to be able to sit down and you can sit there and do a line and not just try to do it over and over, have new ideas with it, and it might turn into something completely different than what it was going to be if you have some dude recording you, even if they're nice about it. If you have any consideration in you, it's just you're on someone else's time. It's different, and it's money sometimes if you're in a real studio, so it only hurts you to sit there longer. So I'd say those are the big things. Learning how to record solo would be the biggest highlight for me on this album. Concept wise, I learned certain things going through it personally, like spiritually and stuff, which is in a lot of the lyrics. But yeah, I would say that would sum it up for the most part.
Sick. I do appreciate you. Not only do I appreciate you providing your commentary, but Pops, I do appreciate you also kind of like adding another layer on top of the question that I already provided. It's like, oh yeah, kind of have my own, kind of have another co-host right now. It's cool. And
Yeah.
it's really nice when I'm gotten that comfortable, or at least it feels like guests have gotten comfortable enough to kind of like take the podcast into their own hands and then start providing questionnaire. It's fun. Final question, really, being that we're only hosting you tonight, Drake, and technically as far as an official member of the band, love you, Brandon.
Andrew's the other half.
Right, exactly. Number 6 would be 5 character slots, whether new favorite artists, albums, singles, or people that push Parasitic Embodiment, and more specifically, Wrought In Eternity to its final state. So this would be like at least 5 of those characters, artists, albums, singles, or people that made Wrought In Eternity what it was when it finally reached public domain. And if not that, we can kind of break it down to something more easy to go through. And that would probably be your top 5 albums of 2023, because that was a big year for music.
I would think, I'll start with my own personal influences for it, or like people who helped me get it to where it was in real life. So it'd be Shobe would be number 1. And then Andrew, they're both number 1 in that sense. They both we're in different ways. But Andrew is really, really, he can be really motivating and a really good hype dude. So he was the perfect person to keep the energy going. Derek Ryan, he came in, he did a little bit of mix work on it at one point, took a peek at it, and he's sick at mixing, so that only helped it. I'm gonna shout out my one of my boys I work with, Chase, because he's kind of he's my brother, one of my best friends, one of my brothers in real life, but he's also, I actually make a lot of music with him. I have various projects with him, but he doesn't like deathcore anymore. So, and I have like a healthy rivalry with him. So this was just kind of it was almost like a motivator, like a healthy hater in my mind. Where I'm like, I'll
like,
show that fucker.
exactly.
And I sent it to him, like, listen to this. And he's like, I know he never did, so it doesn't matter anyways. But it keeps you going at least. I guess I'll say the last one. I don't really talk about my music in real life with people. I would say my coworkers, my buddy Jake, he's like this he's not he likes like Five Finger Death Punch. He's like that dude. So then when I show up, but he like is still like, this is crazy, and wants to hear all my stuff. And like, it kind of reminds me of little kids hearing metal or something for the first time,
Right.
like his reactions. So that's kind of fun. So far as influences for the album, I would say the biggest one would be Awaken Providence, Eternity.
Such a good album.
I love that. I have the wall flag, I have the hoodie, I have the physical. But he has this Adam Mercer has this distinct low. He has a certain bark where it's almost a poly, but it's not. There's some kind of like distortion, a pocket he has. And I don't think that I mean, I'm not Adam Mercer, but you can hear my variation of that. That's one of my main lows, and a lot of the more guttural slam stuff turned into, I guess, if Adam Mercer in my mind was doing that type of stuff. So, and just in general, the epicness of that album, we discussed.
Dude,
this isn't really a blackened album in sound, but so far as in the vibe and like the epic scale, I really like the vibe on Eternity. So
Eternity is one of the best ones.
Yeah, I think that was probably, I know it was my deathcore album it come out in 22.
Yep, 2022.
Yeah, so that was my deathcore album of 22. Other influences would be, I listen to a lot of stuff, but I'm trying to think of what influenced this album. I'd have to shout out Through the Eyes of the Dead for forming my low. I would have to shout out Colpock vocalist Joe. Joe's Joe Mortimer. He's the guitarist, I think. I can't remember first dude's name, but I do pretty much all false chord, and so does Joe, or not Joe, vocalist for Colpock. And now I need to know.
Also, that band name, Colpock.
Yeah, they're from the UK.
Okay.
Colpock. I'm a big trivia guy, so I need to know immediately who the vocalist name is if I'm wrong.
Also, I need to get that. I need to get that band name spelled. So
Oh, okay, I was close. So Joe Mortimer, yeah, he's bass. John, close enough. One letter off. John has this very distinct low. It's kind of like a burpy low.
Okay.
Almost like Travis Ryan humanure low.
Yeah.
So then my low is naturally a lot like that too. So once I heard it, not a lot of people sound just exactly like me because most dudes are doing fries and they're not doing false. So it was kind of like a real recognized real. He doesn't know me. I know him. I know you now that I looked up your name, John. But I heard him and I was like, shit, that dude sounds like me. So and then they came out with an album, Elegant Degradation. I think that was a 23 one through
Degradation.
Reality Fade. But their EP before that, I think is it Third Degree? Well, Third Degree Gurns is on it. But anyways,
sorry.
yeah. So his little really influenced me, and then I'm trying to think of two others that would have formed this album in particular.
Okay.
Did I Envy would have big time. Did I already say Envy?
No, you didn't.
Well, and I say Invirulant. I have my own way of saying it. They say Invirulant. I can't say it, but because a lot of, like I've said, me and Shobe are always kind of trading and playing around.
We're like sparring partners, like vocal sparring partners. Like we sit here and test things off of each other.
Yeah, we'll just send voice memos like all the time of like,
that's sick.
When you're driving and you're like, shit, you know, when you do those random vocals driving, like we send those to each other if we happen to like be feeling hot that minute or are trying to find a new thing to show off.
Give us the turkey.
But the turkey didn't really make it on the album because I can't figure out how to record turkey right yet.
Yeah, it sounds terrible.
You know how to record it. You figured out a way.
I can't do it, bro. Like, you won't even hear it on the podcast. That's how, like, every time he's ever tried to do it on the podcast, like, the freaking mic short circuits and it just does. We don't hear shit.
I know. I can do it, but I can't do it like him. And when I do it, it's like my highs. If I don't keep up on it, like if I were to try it right now, it's like 50-50 on it. If it would sound how it's supposed to sound. It's like a very inconsistent for me.
His version of it sounds super sick.
It sounds different than yours. I don't know what the difference is. I feel like mine sounds more cheesy, I feel like. Yours sounds more like real. Mine sounds like a BDM, like Indonesian band, like that learned how to do it. And they like, it's like they're doing it in broken English somehow. Shout out to Indonesia and Brutal Mind and Denny and all of those. Those guys keeping it fucking brutal over there. That's such an amazing country.
I mean, dude, seriously, shout out to all those bands. Like, I mean, dude, fucking Makhluk was the beginning. The beginning, bro. We all love Indonesia here on the Anatomy podcast.
Yeah, those are the boys. They're so nice too. It's like they have a different culture. They're just got something figured out that we don't. But
yeah.
So I think I don't know if I'm at 4 or 5, but last one I'll throw out Mental Cruelty Zwelich was big on my play. I think that's my 23 deathcore album. So that was being played a shit ton during the making of this. So I will I'll throw that hat in the ring too. I can't say I'm doing anything quite like, I'm in the minority. I really like the new vocalist. I actually prefer him. But
he's good.
I love him. I love that album. That was actually produced by Josh Schroeder. So the guy who does the Lorna Shore stuff.
Yep.
That mix is really good. So yeah, I would say that was my influences. I wish Andrew was on to be able to share his. But yeah,
we'll do that at time.
Yeah. Shout out to Andrew.
Shout out to Andrew. Wish you were here. Wish you were here to share a conversation with us. Ooh. Yeah. Let's see. So that would be number 6. And really the other question would be like, what do the members of Parasitic Embodiment do for fun to connect outside of musical creation? We'll just have to hold that one off until the next time. And who knows, maybe by the next time we do an anatomy podcast session, maybe you guys will have managed to scoop up even more lads. We'll see.
We
Now
might have a
I
bassist.
might have a bassist. Okay, a little bit of a
I
clink.
think we do. I haven't really met him too much yet, but supposedly on the next album he's going to record on it, which, speaking of which, I will say there's probably about half of another album already written, and it's moving in a little bit more grandiose of a direction so far as trying to implement some a little bit of synth and orchestral stuff moving forward.
Badass.
And that's how that stuff's been written so far. I think Andrew always writes. Yeah, he's so sick at writing breakdowns, and I would say the stuff on this is a lot more faster breakdowns and tighter breakdowns. It's a lot more like aggressive.
Gotcha.
And the pacing. So
sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, more or less as we then kind of break off and descend into the latter half of the Anatomy Podcast, episode 73, featuring Drake Gambill and Brandon Papa Slam Shobe. We kick off the second half with more the clickbait questions, right? So more or less this would be for a live setting. This is like the best scenario I could think of because, well, I mean, any band who is first starting out would love to go into the future and think of themselves in a live setting, maybe post set. They have a couple people walking up to them, dripping in sweat. Maybe they're missing their teeth. Who knows? Because that's what happened to me. That was one of my first fan interactions.
I know it happens. Everyone knows a guy who's lost a tooth in the pit.
I just can't believe that was my first fan interaction. Just like, hi, what's up? I know your channel. Disappears, comes back. Hey, what's up? Just spits a fucking tooth. I'm like, what? Where's your dental
I know.
insurance? It's insane.
They come out so easy too. It's like, oh, I didn't know that happened.
Right. So with you being the second vocalist really in this project, there was a vocalist before, but he has since departed. And Wrought In Eternity, that's your vocal contribution. That is your debut entry into the band, as far as I know.
I actually named the first album as well, and about half of the song titles.
Sick. There you go.
Well, that part.
I did, yeah. Ryan couldn't think of anything, or I don't know what the deal was. So, what Andrew asked, he's like, "I need help," basically, and I'm like, "All right, whatever." Here's some. I actually named the band too. He's like, "What's a sick band name?" I'm like, I threw him some, and he's like, I threw out Parasitic Embodiment, and he's like, I'm gonna name it that. And at this point, I had no idea I would be in the band or anything. But yeah,
bro, what a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, more or less, you already answered the question without me even asking it. But with you already conquering the original question, after Wrought In Eternity, and maybe after the first album that you gave a listen to before you even got started on this one, is there any headcanon for the lore and maybe the story behind Parasitic Embodiment, or from a creative standpoint, why you think Parasitic Embodiment applies as the owner, right? The overseer for Wrought In Eternity so well? So that was definitely a packed question. Is there any headcanon behind the reason of the name for you now after these two albums have been out for some time?
Yeah, it definitely applies to the new album, because there's a lot of religious themes within it, and there's a lot of both within religion and just within situations of man itself, a lot of corruption. So Parasitic Embodiment applies to that in the sense of some of these like these corrupt entities in the universe are the embodiment of a parasite leeching off of others for gain. So that's how that would apply to that. So far as the canon of Parasitic Embodiment, the first album was a joke album, and it was meant to be a joke album, but I got carried away and now it's not. joke band. So I would say where it moves forward in lore, I don't know exactly, but yeah,
Fair enough.
if that
No,
answers it.
yeah, that answered that question.
If
Um,
you tried in the past, in Rotten Eternity, what if you on the other side of eternity kind of go on like a future swing?
Well, like you mean like the other side of the,
Yeah.
well, it kind of deals with both sides of the coin conflicting with themselves constantly throughout the album. So there's essentially our protagonist in the album is sent to be a prophecy of good in this case, and this concept of, you know, what the true God would be in this universe, in this canon. So my brain farted and completely lost track. Help me.
Yeah. So,
you're fine.
where do you go from there?
Oh,
is
yeah,
what
the
I was asking, and I suggested, I don't know. Do you go into the future? Do you go to the present? Where do you go with it?
our protagonist is dealing with both of those essentially already. And it's kind of complex, as you can see. I even lose my train of thought on it. I definitely overwrote it, but I tried to write it in a sense where it can be interpreted either in pretty open-ended in either the good or evil aspect of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, because of the duality and the conflict that's already occurring within the album, there's not really anywhere to go except to kind of like be content, acknowledge the current situation, and then start something new somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. And from a marketing standpoint, like some people
It's kind
might
of
say
like
that,
a
but
choose your own adventure, and
yeah,
I'm really into like games like Silent Hill and stuff, so I wanted it to have multiple interpretable endings. Is the person at the end ultimately going to heaven or hell, or is that even a thing? There's definitely a lot of ways you can look at it. So I have my own personal like canon ending in my head, but I leave that up for um the people to decide. In this case, I planned on releasing the stream as a full lyric stream so people could follow this concept, but due to budget, it just didn't really happen. So I would like to get the lyrics out there somehow. I think I don't handle the distro for this on like DistroKid and stuff, but I know if you pay the premium, it'll add all the lyrics and stuff. So maybe that's something I should look into. But yeah.
Okay. Question 2 would be, what separates Parasitic Embodiment from other bands in the deathcore community?
I don't know. What people seem to tell me is that it sounds like old school, like MySpace deathcore with more like more guttural vocals than typically found um in deathcore. A lot of that being due to me, you know, kind of being more of a false chord vocalist, where the vast majority of what we hear pumping out on a daily basis is maining fries. A big part of that too, because supposedly they're a lot easier to record. I don't exactly know because I can't do them, but yeah.
Cool. So what you would say is that Parasitic Embodiment distinguishes itself from other deathcore bands because, of course, the instrumental side of Parasitic Embodiment encompanies more of the MySpace colorful deathcore era, where things were just really experimental. They were really crazy. It almost sounded like deathcore on cocaine compared to what it is now, as opposed to now where, well, deathcore is just smoking cigarettes or just kind of relaxing, kind of chilling out where it can. But on the vocal side, you, because of your experience also with projects like Necrophilic Beatdown, you definitely have a more prominent slam, still articulated, which again, very iconic. And I know that that's going to help push you in, to greater heights in the future. But deathcore instrumentals sided with really well articulated slam vocal spectrum.
Yeah. It's to me, the material doesn't sound like something straight ripped out of that era, but there's definitely a lot of like, he does a lot of the old school tremming. I feel like his breakdown setup is the way he mixes it, though, to me feels very modern. So it's kind of like, I don't see the MySpace core thing as much. To me, it just sounds good. It sounds like actual songs, but I'm more partial to that era in general. It just sounds right to me. So
Gotcha.
to me, it doesn't sound dated like MySpace core, but it definitely is wearing something of an influence of it. Pretty on its sleeve. It's just Andrew's writing. I don't know how he does it, but he's got a really good grasp on that. For me as a vocalist, like you're saying, the instruments are kind of not at the forefront. I'm a music fan. I enjoy, there's multiple albums I enjoy, particularly for just every specific, like I might like an album just because of the way the drums sound on it, or I like the way this album sounds because of the bass, and then I like how some albums all come together. Honestly, I, as a vocalist, have a hard time with albums that are supposed to be carried entirely by the vocals. They don't really feel real to me. So that's one thing with Andrew, is he writes in a style that feels like a complete song to me, where my goal in a band is always to be another thought, like, another instrument vocally, in a sense.
Right.
Not in the sense of just doing gutturals and not having any singing ability, but in the sense of, I want us all to be on an equal playing field, and every part of a good record, everything should sound good. It shouldn't just be one part, you know what I mean, or two, or these vocal Olympic ones, especially now there's so goddamn many, they're not going to stand the test of time very well, unfortunately, outside of the big releases.
It'll be very similar to I think it'll be very similar.
How many gent bands do you remember?
Oh, none.
The big ones, the big few, like, but that's all it was from like 2014 through 18. Yeah.
And honestly, I'm finding myself gravitating more towards these days, especially in deathcore, right? I'm very glad that I missed the gent era, because for me, gent should only be a piece of the puzzle as opposed to being the entirety of the music. And I think that's why that era did not last as long as it could have, is because they were so hell-bent on just making everything as fast and tremolo as possible, that they didn't really take a moment, whether musically in the moment or I don't even know, just writing it or in post. They didn't really think to take breaks. And I think that's why gent died out. It ended up being a very, very quick burn. It was like a red giant star as opposed to a red dwarf. It just burnt out really quickly. It burnt out so quickly. And because of that, it didn't last long. It glowed really bright for a little bit, because it's like, wow, it's so musically compelling. How are they playing this so fast? But it didn't even last like half a decade, if I remember correctly. Like, not really.
There's definitely elements people have carried over in guitar tones, but like, I'd say the good things that came from gent is stuff like Viljarda and Now Humanity's Last Breath. What's up, buddy?
I've always known Humanity's Last Breath to be more of like a Thal band too. Much more or less.
A little bit, buddy. Sorry, my son was talking to me. I gotta run and grab my charger. We're taking a detour for a moment while we're doing this.
Let's do it. We always love house tours, bro. It keeps the podcast fun and entertaining. It makes me wonder, like, if I should start walking around the house or venturing around and, you know, like
You should. You should. You
doing
should just
cameos and
like
shit.
do one at your mom's house. Just have her like in the background. Just
Well,
stuff like
I
that.
currently am at my mom's house.
But you need to do this in the living room.
Yeah, one day for sure. When I have a Shure SMB attached to the bottom of my phone or something, I'll do it then. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because it kind of looks like you're taking a piss right now too. Oh, he is? Okay, that's why he's muted.
Yeah, I'm on mute.
Oh, gotcha. Well, damn good thing you're on mute in that case. At least for a moment, just like
Midstream piss, you know. We just went up PG.
Well, dude, we had to get the charger anyways. I'm like, I'm already here.
yeah, that's fair. No, I was like, I was thinking earlier when we took that most recent break because of the conversion process for the audio files. I'm like, man, I hate and also love when we have to take a break because that means the boys can go take a piss right now if they really need to, or they can go get another pop like good old Pops over here did. Good shit. So with that question now conquered, I think question 3 for part 2, I think it's time for that. And therefore,
question.
What's up?
So in terms of what distinguishes PE from other deathcore, why no highs, Drake? Why no highs?
So no highs.
Deathcore with no highs.
No highs because hold on a second. Can I use the phone charger? I'm getting the phone charger.
Don't avoid the question, Drake.
This is the whole what I was talking about. This is we can't all be rock stars.
Yeah. So fries equals rock star? I mean, shit, I'm down.
No, I just mean having to go like pee live and get a charger and
No, I'm messing with you.
No highs because one, I have recordings with older bands with highs when I was doing highs consistently, but I'm a low natural where like I could do lows for days where if I don't do highs all the time, I suck at them. And then Andrew specifically requested no highs on this album. So I was like, that's perfect. But then like people like Shobe are like, how are you gonna like keep it fresh and interesting? So then it's like, oh well, I have like 10 jillion different lows that I do. So that's kind of how that panned out.
Gotcha. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, we're back in.
No,
we're back
I suck at
room.
I'm a fraud. I can't do highs unless I'm like doing them 5 days a week.
You're a frog? Do a frog mating tone real good.
No, I'm a fraud.
I
I'm
was
a
messing with you.
fraudulent high vocalist.
Are you creamy?
No, that's such bullshit because you can do them and they sound good. But if Andrew said that if it was a request, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't want me to do them, and I was like, that's great because that's a lot of work. But he's open to them with layers, so I don't know. Maybe I'll bring back the high. I have really high, no pun intended, really high expectations for highs in every vocalist. If it's not black metal. Black metal is different. That's more of a raw, like from the heart thing. But like when we're trying to like look cool and do these deathcore highs and sound like a badass mountain lion or whatever you wanna choose your character. They gotta be like that mountain lion, like A Night in Texas, early Chelsea Grin. To the Grave has some really nasty highs. Like if they don't have a bite, I don't know. A good example is Awaken Providence. Now we're speaking about it. his highs to me clearly are not he does them to do them, but they're still very sick. But that's like a good example of, in this particular case, I do like his, but like that, I don't know, that Dickie Allen styled high, goblin thing doesn't do anything for me anymore. So it's got to be the mountain lion or bust. That's my take on the highs. And if I can't do those, I'm not doing them.
Yeah, that's
So,
fair. I mean, honestly, I think one of my favorite things to learn as of recently has just been actually like borderline skinny shrieks. And that's just like the shrill. Like I haven't recorded it that often. And especially because, well, this stupid ass mic, because I've had it so long, it's starting to get desensitized to when I scream into it and I'm losing gain on it and I don't want to break it. So
I didn't know that was a thing.
I didn't know it was a thing either, but apparently it is. I mean, most of the podcast,
collapse the diaphragm. Yeah, you can damage that shit.
you can. Yeah.
Just like an ear can get, you blow your
That's
ear
probably
out.
why I always sound like shit.
Well, honestly,
Same mic for 10 years.
It's been really fun to learn how to do that. Let's see, what's a good example? Have you ever heard what is it? Worm Shepherd's Absorda Nail?
I mean, I've heard everything they've done, but Worm Shepherd is one that slowly is growing on me. So I don't know their tracks or which albums they're from, all of them yet.
Right. Okay. Well, whenever you get the chance, if you haven't heard it yet, listen to Absorda Nail, and that's off of their
Ritual Hymns.
Yeah.
That I've listened to that one a bunch. That River of Knives breakdown, sick.
Yes, I agree. So the shriek that he did in Absorda Nail, I'm getting very close to that. Getting very, very close to that. And it's so fucking satisfying in the moment because like it doesn't take that much power now because I'm learning to combine like actual screaming without hurting my vocals with Dickie Allen goblin tones. And when you combine those and like slowly just kind of heighten the airway, well, you can get to some pretty high fucking notes and therefore you can shriek some pretty high notes. So I'm getting close to that and it's very exciting. I'm hoping to unleash it the right way in a song in the future because it takes a little bit of power. And I'm afraid that one day I'm gonna like blow a mic because of it. So, like that's always just like I don't want to toot my own horn, but like it's loud. It's very loud. It's very intense. Like if you heard it in the woods, you would be ready to load some fucking buckshot. I'll tell you what. So now I think would be a really, really good time to go ahead and go under the skin of Wrought in Eternity. This is an 11-track album full of just interesting, very, very colorful instrumental MySpace era deathcore, or at least inspired by it, accompanied by well-articulated slam/deathcore vocal spectrum. Really good shit, made by two people, incredible. But starting off the Under the Skin session, as we kind of go head first, deep dive into this, and go track by track to kind of dig into its deeper depths, lyrically speaking. And there's also some rain in the background, which is a nice little touch. Candlelight behind the TV. It's good shit. I start out by entering us into an imaginary scenario. And usually it's a library because, well, Under the Skin, I like to think of it as opening up a book. After all, most albums could be compared to books and the chapters that reside within them. Usually, even elementary level reads will have about 20 chapters. This one has 11, and they're at least 3 pages worth of writing, right? So I'm going to try to experiment a little bit and get us into a different scenario. As all creative mediums, they are created, right? They have to be created. So instead of a book, which is what I usually do, maybe let's go into the woods. Let's go into the forest. And essentially you find the album cover for Wrought In Eternity, but it's a statue. It's a weird shrine looking thing. So you got these three demons. They're just kind of hanging out there in the middle of the woods. You're like, why the fuck is this here? Why is it sculpted in the middle of the woods? But the woods look pretty nice, so let's go check it out. Hopefully there isn't anything hiding behind the trees, especially parasitic embodiments, multiple of them. And maybe that's the relative term for them. You go up to it, and at the bottom, it's carved in the wood. It's dremeled in the wood. I think that's the term. Wrought in Eternity. You're like, well, isn't that a play on the word Wrought in Eternity? And then maybe there's an X on the floor, and you're like, well, I don't have a shovel, but it seems to be soft dirt. Hopefully there isn't a corpse below here. You kind of dig through that, and then there is maybe a scroll. I don't know. There's a scroll that says Wrought in Eternity as well, and there is a warning with a stamp. There is a book. There is a leather book, but that's still in the dirt, okay? And you got this scroll. It says Wrought in Eternity at the top. Maybe this is something that was not meant to be unearthed by the wrong person. You are the right person. This is some weird prophecy shit going on. And so you unveil the scroll, and it says Wrought in Eternity. And then below it, there's a chunk of text trying to forewarn you about what you're about to learn. What would that text read? And why? What would that text say and why for this album?
I think it would summarize, it would be, who am I? Because our main character is conflicted from a lot of different angles and is being pulled in multiple different directions and questioning different things regarding faith, their role in the album, what they're supposed to accomplish, and why it's them that has to do it.
Ooh,
So yeah, actually, speaking on prophecies, one of the lyrics from the initial song is a child chosen, their whispers shudder omens.
Ooh.
So it's like, yeah, we'll get into it more, but so the underlying question is a dilemma of character, essentially, between good and evil.
So ironically, maybe you being the person who walks into the woods, maybe you end up connecting with the character depicted or even foreseen in the text, in the musical compositions of Wrought in Eternity, because the character that is written is also in conflict. And therefore, you have that scroll that says, who am I? Or who are you? The text that you're about to read remarks a dilemma in character, a obstacle, and a brief stall of personality and identity, both spiritually, physically, and prophetically speaking, or something like that. There are no prophecies here except for the one that you are about to witness. And then, well, that's the end of the scroll. Would that work pretty well?
Yeah, I think
Cool.
so.
Sweet.
At its core.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And therefore, then you have this kind of strange, almost strange, like fresh leather bound text. This is a book. Really, the only difference between this episode and prior ones is that we ventured into the woods, found a shrine with like 3 weird demon-esque dudes engraved into it. It says Wrought in Eternity. You're like, what the fuck? I'm like, why is this in the middle of the woods? You unearth a scroll and the book, and now we're opening the text. It's composed of riddles, as most lyrics are. It's not exactly direct. You have to interpret it. You have to decide what's going to happen next. Starting off, we have track 1, which I myself am always a sucker for a good title track. And maybe perhaps even better, Wrought in Eternity, right? We had the scroll which was the first thing you ended up unveiling, the first thing you ended up revealing to yourself and reading. Maybe perhaps that scroll represents the intro track to this album. I think that actually worked out really well. I didn't realize that I was doing that in the moment. So you had the scroll, and that's like Wrought In Eternity. So therefore, speaking on behalf officially of the first track on this 11-track record, okay, is there any other commentary you would want to provide as far as the lyrics in this song before we move on to track 2?
So Wrought In Eternity starts off with a birth in its first lines, hearkening to rot in the title, album title. It's insidious, a ripple through the stratosphere, two genes combine, behold this massive nuclei. And it's essentially, describing an ovary being impregnated, a human being created and born. And then we move through, as I was saying, a child chosen, their whisper shudder omens. Well, within this cult that our protagonist is part of, he is chosen to basically take back their freedom because there's an oppressor throughout the album. We'll get more into in the second track, the Vile King. So it's kind of the underdog tale. Like, these are like peasants in this outskirts, and they are basically going to be reduced to nothing and have nothing left if they don't do something.
Gotcha.
And within prophecies, this was already all predicted, and then a child would be born to stop it. We're hearkening almost to like a Jesus-like scenario. So then we quickly go through this process of this person growing up into a man. But the thing is they don't want anything to do with this. They don't want to be the prophecy. They don't want to have to fight this fight for their people at the time. And they're so miserable that at the end of it, they actually hang themselves. So like the final breakdown is where that happens, and it's like, step the fuck up, send me off to be carry on, silence to the incessant thoughts, the wars and fights they fought for my retribution.
Okay.
And like, I recoil gasping as they kick the chair, and they being like, in this case, the voices in their head that are influencing them to do this. And they, as in, they think that basically them having to be this prophecy, they pushed him to do this. But then ultimately in track 2, we wake up, and it's a matter of unclear throughout the album until, depending on which ending you want it to be, if did they wake up in hell? Is this purgatory? Are they in some kind of did they not die? Was it a dream? They didn't hang themselves. So it's kind of like, but everything is trippy. But as you know, sometimes when you're in these states, almost like a dream, you can't necessarily, something's amiss, but you can't wrap your head around that you're where exactly you are. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. Well,
or where reality is at that moment.
Right. Okay. Well, then we immediately descend into track 2, The Vile King, which is, I assume, when our protagonist is fully grown. He is an adult. He is having to make these decisions, maybe attempt to separate his identity as maybe a vessel. Maybe this can be a reference, a comparison to the movie Hereditary. I'm not sure if you've seen that. But that's basically the entirety of that plot. Spoiler alert. Would the Vile King be talking about this protagonist and the prophecy that he is meant to fulfill, but he does not want to fulfill the prophecy in the first place?
So essentially, we're taken to a scene immediately upon awakening from the hanging, where they're within a coliseum, which is within the city, where not where the peasants are, but it's like he's cast within a battle now, where it's within their coliseum in their city, where the king reigns, and he's coined the vile king because he's basically a tyrant, and it's almost like, think of like Egyptian times where all the people within the cult have been reduced to slaves, and just basically anybody around them, any religion, any situation, and that's the whole thing. I call it a cult because our protagonist is having such a hard time because they view it as a cult, but the cult obviously thinks that they're the good guys, and that's a question of, is anybody really the good guy in this situation, and if so, who is it? But our protagonist wakes up to be able to spectate almost. They're not in the battle, but it's like in a video game, like third person, where you can oversee it happening. And he sees truly how grotesque and the horrors that his people and people in general are facing from this monster in power. And then it makes him realize that basically he was being a little bitch, and that he needs to step up and fulfill the prophecy and stop this king.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So more or less, he's supposed to be a background character watching this chaos unfold. He has been born into and grown up around a cult that is trying to maybe create a pact or create a deal, make a deal with a higher power. But instead, he's realizing that maybe his prophecy is to be a counteracting force against that.
Well, in our sense, it's more nuanced in the sense of the king, the main dog controlling the pieces, so to speak, believes that he is God.
Oh.
And our cult believes in God, but the biggest dilemma, to simplify it, is our protagonist doesn't believe necessarily that their religion could be the right one. So they can't put complete faith in it. They're a skeptic of their own, supposed prophecy and the unit as a whole. And then there's corruption within the cult itself. So even if it were for good, there's all these negative aspects surrounding it that kind of push them to want to rebel against the idea of having to fill the shoes of this prophecy if they can't 100% believe in it to begin with.
Okay, interesting. Well, I do appreciate you providing the context for what is track 2 of Wrought in Eternity. We then move on to track 3, which is Towers of Golgotha.
Yes. So in Towers of Golgotha, this is taking place, which is obviously a reference to a real place in real life. Fictionally, I picked certain areas. It's placed sort of in my own fictional time of like the reign of Titus, back in kind of like these are places in like Rome and Italy and stuff like that. So
okay.
There's a war where our main protagonist now is actually physically materialized instead of spectating. And essentially there's a ritual that occurs within the cult where at Golgotha, where there's like Lord of the Rings style, these towers that, the king is manning, and basically they have to break them to rescue somebody who is required to fulfill the prophecy too, who's within that tower. We don't know who they are quite yet at this point in the story, but they do a ritual which allows our character to obtain the keys of Set, which essentially makes them beyond human. And at this point now, our character begrudgingly knows that there has to be some truth to this, but he's physically feeling it, but he doesn't necessarily like it, but he then takes the tower and releases Kashtar, who is also in basically a subplot. There's some romantic relationship between our main protagonist and her, and she's also part of the prophecy. They both are required to basically obtain the things they need within these spiritual contexts to actually have the means to completely overthrow the king. So it's basically a saving the damsel in distress song at its core.
Okay, understood. Track 4, we have Imminent Premonition.
Imminent Premonition. This is Andrew's favorite song. He named this song title 2 as well. This, I think of, are you familiar with the X-Files at
A
all?
little bit.
Well, let's think of it this way. The X-Files has its main story arc, its main lore, so to speak. And then sometimes it'll go off on a tangent for an episode where it'll have like a one-off like creature feature where it's like a sci-fi monster that they encounter, a complete standalone plot in the same universe that they wrap up within an episode or a couple episodes as a side arc.
Yeah.
So this is that in the sense that it takes place in the universe, but it isn't related to our main character. Within the cult, like headquarters, their base. This is an example of the corruption also to an abuse of power within it. So there's clairvoyance in this universe, and this clairvoyant visit basically anyone who has ever seen her and visited her. She sees them going to hell no matter how holy or pure they are. Well, part of it is a lesson in you should have faith regardless of that. You shouldn't have to have somebody affirm it for you. So because of this, the ironic part is by seeing her, they sentence themselves to hell by getting their fortune told. She basically writes it for them. So that's why. What's the line? My crystal ball offers no money back. It doesn't. It only shows the truth. In my many years of practice, I've never really seen it happen. They all get sent below. Devoid or deeds are saints. And then she's looking in the ball in the breakdown where it's leading into it, where it says, "Oh, let's see. I see you. Oh yes, I'll be seeing you in hell." And then the breakdown hits. So essentially she passes on this curse, and of course she's almost it's unknown if she's human or if she's directly from the realm of hell, and if that's real or what it is, how she is what she is. So it's kind of like a side quest creature feature thing on that one.
Cool. All right. Next track would be Catacombs of What Once Was There, I think. Let's see.
Catacombs of What Once Slept. So that was also written by Andrew. So at this point, we go back to our main protagonist. So our main protagonist is with Kashtar, and they've breached an important area within the city where the Vile King is. So they're within his realms, and there's a certain tablet they have to get down in these catacombs. Think of it as a fetch quest, so to speak. Okay. And when they go down there, it's like it's meant to be as basically gross as possible. So as they're descending, there's 40 sets of stairs, and they keep descending and they keep descending, and it just reeks like just shit and piss and dead bodies. And it's just like as they spiral down, it's all of these people trapped in cells as they're descending. So then basically they uncover that God is essentially it's viscera begets God. So basically human organ, meat, blood, bone, a God is born. So it's basically concluding more of the prophecy that is our main character a vessel for God? Is he God himself? Or is God simply leading him? And yeah, so it's kind of a more of a adding, it's a dark setting and it adds more lore to the actual legitimacy and conflicting struggle of trying to push our character in the direction of the greater good. And the king has all these tablets and these scrolls, and he has them hidden in these places because he doesn't want he thinks he's God, so he doesn't want them to have access, but deep down he wonders too, and he's scared. So it's not like he's going to destroy them and whatnot. He's still somewhat superstitious deep down, so he basically just tries to hide the truth.
And of course, if I may ask, because I haven't really asked regarding any of the other tracks on the album so far, does the lyrical meaning of these songs present as symbolism as well for you in real life regarding anything that was occurring during the time of the creative process?
100%. So for me, I've gone through life, I would say agnostic. And for me, it was a point personally where I found my own spirituality. So a lot of this character is my reflection of that journey through it, of basically fighting it and kicking and screaming the whole way through. But then having to realize that, yeah, there's something greater than me, and you have to trust whatever life, that path, this universe is throwing your way. And I feel like a lot of people believe that they can be their own God, but it never really seemed, if you look at it, none of those people actually really seem to be truly happy at the end of the day. So I'm not saying that I am personally, but it's definitely a personal record in that sense, but I don't want to push religion in that sense on people. I want it to be open-ended. It's not like it's a Christian album by any means, but somebody who's religious and had that pointed out to them may be able to read between the lines and then see those messages. But and maybe a listener in general would kind of catch the gist if they were really, I don't know. It's just, there's so many ways you can go about it. You can look at this album too if you don't read between the lines, and a lot of it's written where completely nihilistic, where if there is no God and all there is us, and if we are God, that sucks because we suck. So yeah,
that's a good point. I like that. Okay. As we're continuing to navigate through what is a 11-track album, we are now on track 6, which is Necropolis of Garda. What is going on here, bud?
So Necropolis of Garda is another basically big ass battle scene, and it's in an area where at this point the king, in Garda, there's a burial site where it's basically the dump site for anyone. The king, by the carriage load, that's where he disposes of his corpses. So then at this point, the king is feeling the pressure of the cult making advances and actually surprising him by closing in certain regards and actually causing issues for him. So then he starts dabbling into the scrolls, but tries to basically do it for what he wants. So there comes a point where he figures out how to, similar to the clairvoyant, tap into these spiritual realms, but in the dark spectrum of them. And he raises every corpse, skeleton, whatever it is in Garda, where he dumps his bodies from the dead. Basically, because, as I said, some of our cult is starting to actually cause ripples and problems and taking out some of his actually like higher up people within his hierarchy and army. So he's like gonna big dick swing it and be like, well, I'm just gonna raise this whole army of the dead, and you can kill them as many times as you want, but they'll just keep coming back. So that's kind of the scene painted within this. It's supposed to be kind of a big, I mean, imagine some type of ritual that invokes like just like a crater of dead bodies back to life and what that would look like.
That'd be insane, is what that would be.
Yeah, it would just look like a bunch of worms squiggling around from afar, but it's limbs and parts of bodies, and yeah.
Bring me that 115, please.
Right.
Track 7, we have Ritual of Kishtara.
So
Keshter.
this is kind of a pinnacle moment where essentially we're reaching a head where there's basically a ritual that they're going to have to do to stop the king and his army of the undead at this point. But it involves a pretty extensive process with Keshter. Like I mentioned earlier, she's physically required for what's going to ultimately turn the tide to happen. So this is basically this ritual happens within 3 parts, and within the first stage is like them setting up the stage for how this is going to happen. And then moving on to the next track is when the ritual has been completed by the end of part 1. So in part 2, Ritual of Keshter Requiem, this is kind of like the dude's life flashing before his eyes of everything that he's been dealing with, kind of a montage, so to speak. And he realizes that he is the prophecy at this point in the album, and that he's going to have to let go of that part of him that he's been fighting and completely submit to something else in order to accomplish this goal. And he gets completely filled with what is God in the scenario, like being filled with like the Holy Ghost almost, but in our fictional reality. And then at this point, he is basically, think of like, have you seen like Dragon Ball Super? Okay. Well, it's like when Goku reaches that level of Ultra Instinct, like this completely changes his like demeanor. Like he's unrecognizable by the end of this,
right,
this whole stage of the ritual being completed. And then it gets all flipped upside down in Ritual of Keshter 3 Purgatory, because we see our first glimpse of actually going to hell physically. So in order to stop the king, there's certain basically tasks that have to be accomplished in what can be viewed as either purgatory or the beginnings of hell. like the top crust or layer. And within it, and it actually is all underwater. And so you can breathe underwater. They're traversing water to their objective at this point. And there's a part where Kashtir actually nearly is killed, but isn't. But if she was, she would have been, trapped in this purgatory place forever. Because there's going to be like a window where they're able to get out of it. Because at the bottom in this stage of purgatory, like if you want to think of the different layers of hell, there's all these different kings and tyrants similar to the Vile King, these dudes who thought they were their own gods. And what their hell is they're trapped to the bottom of the sea by these chains. They're just like anchored and bracketed down, but they can't breathe the water. So, but they can't die either because they're now not mortal. So they're eternally in a perpetual state of the anxiety, horror of drowning. So it's just like, basically these people clutching and horrified and like, blowing all these bubbles. Well, there's a point where they get a hold of Kashtir and they try to keep her trapped with them, basically. And our protagonist is able to free her and accomplish getting out of the purgatory by the end of it. And at this point, the ritual is complete, so they're on their way to the king himself, moving forward in the album to like the final battle.
Gotcha. On another note, looking over at Brandon's screen, that's creepy as hell. Just looking into that darkness.
I know he's pretending he's here for moral support, but he's obviously fucking gone.
Oh,
no, there he is.
No, I literally was just walking by when I heard you say that. Okay. I've been trying to crowd kids.
You're just listen. You're not missing anything. It's
God
me
damn.
trying to pretend that I'm an author, but I don't know how to explain anything. So
that kind of spooked me for a second. The moment I mentioned that, he's like,
swimming pool.
dude, you literally have the lighting like from The Ring. It's like looks like a screenshot from the back of the Ring DVD.
Well, I'm just here by myself.
Oh no, there's not at all a kid behind you right now.
If you see anything like that, you're probably imagining it.
I think Drake thought he saw a female apparition earlier in session, so I guess we'll just have to keep that in mind. But
Yeah.
One.
Oh, that's a good question. He said she just seemed like a man, like a dreamy manifestation or something like that. I'm like, okay, bud. I think no, that's right. He was like, it kind of looks like I don't think I've seen her before. But yeah, I think he was just seeing stuff. But let's see. Track 10 we have. Wait, were we still working on track 9? I'm so sorry.
I think we're moving on to Shadow of Maya.
Okay, so that would be track 10.
What's track 9? It should be the final ritual of Kashtir, Purgatory.
Yeah, Purgatory. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Shadow of Maya is basically, think of like in Pokemon Victory Road. So like, are you a Pokemon guy or no? No. So Victory Road is basically like the final area in every Pokemon game before the final boss. So it's like a bunch of sweet shit happens in Victory Road. Like, it's like the final montage of epic shit on your way to the big battle. But in this case, it's moving through the complex of the Vile King, with Kashtir, a protagonist. There's a point in here where he pronounces his love to her too, and they kind of become a thing like that. But yeah, so it's pitch black, all of this stuff. At this point, the Vile King and his army of the dead, like they can all see in the dark and shit, so everything is just pitch black. So like picture them traveling through these like limestone catacombs with torches and stuff like that. So, and Shadow of Maya is actually a Amaya is a reference to Easter Egg, a project that's already been recorded. That's an entirely different band. Where I think I'm tying by it was written and recorded before this, but it wasn't really, it's still not released yet. It's a blackened symphonic deathcore thing I got going on.
Okay.
And it's called Austerity of Amaya is going to be the name. So Shadow of Amaya is a reference to that. So I'm kind of tying the universes together a little bit. And then so I think we're moving on to our final track then, where
We are indeed.
Papa Shobe helps me get it done on that one. The glossolia complex. Maybe that's not exactly how you say it. You probably shouldn't name things that you don't know how to pronounce. But what that word is like speaking in tongues, like how some religions speak in tongues. So it's a reference to that and a point within this setting where they're kind of all like the people within the cult, which at this point is accepted as like, he's like, no, this is the real deal. So he views it more as his people he's fighting for now instead of a negative cult type thing. It's more so just his way of life now. But yeah, they're speaking in tongues to magnify their power. Basically in the final fight with the Vile King, and he's the bloodshed prolonger because he's been prolonging their misery for so long. And ultimately, though, they defeat him, and it basically ends on a cliffhanger of being reborn. The final word is reborn. So reborn in what way? I told you my interpretation of the album, but it's written a lot more loosely, where it could be that they're just waking up from the dream and none of this was real. You don't know. So
right. So I mean, of course, it is up for interpretation, and you wrote Wrought In Eternity as an album to be up for interpretation throughout its 11 tracks. But of course, in this session, what's most important to me is how you interpret it or interpreted it. That's a mouthful. I don't know why that word's so hard to pronounce. It's like purple burglar alarm for the Irish or some shit. But for me, we're getting to the end of this album, and we eventually do defeat the Vile King. Would you consider the Vile King, for your own personal example, your own personal connection with this album, would you consider the Vile King to be how you viewed God for the longest time and your spiritual battle with that? And basically by conquering the Vile King, or maybe in this case, conquering your impression of him, conquering your more negative impression of him, that's how you were able to kind of like come into your new venue, your new path of spirituality?
I would say, I don't know if I would necessarily, I lumped religion in with anything with man that I don't like. I feel like man at its core is a very evil, corrupt, and it's easy to get lost in that, but there is definitely good. So I think it's more of a message of realizing that sometimes something you view as the enemy is honestly could be your best friend. I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at it, I guess.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I look at it as finding a glimmer of hope and positivity in a world ruled by a corrupt man, basically.
Or in recent reference to, sorry, continue.
Having some faith, basically, gaining some faith in the face of, I think it's more admirable to have faith that there's something better than this when you can be having nothing but be surrounded by horrible things, because I think most of us in life will find a couple things that make you go, it's just too beautiful. There's got to be some meaning to that. It can't just be just cause, it's like, it's trying to embrace that part for me personally.
Okay, cool.
So it's supposed to be a positive album for me, but its atmosphere is very dark. So it's kind of a dichotomy within itself.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, cool. And let's see. Definitely more of a critical question afterwards that I usually don't have the opportunity to ask, nor have I thought to ask before. So after conducting a lobotomy for Wrought In Eternity, and after us concluding the first half of the podcast talking about bands that inspired all of the members in Parasitic Embodiment, what do you think distinguishes Wrought In Eternity from other iconic records relevant to deathcore in your own personal opinion? If there are any details about Wrought In Eternity that you do think distinguishes Wrought In Eternity from other deathcore records. Did that make sense? Another packed question for sure.
It's hard for me to not feel egotistical answering that.
We don't use the word ego here. It's okay. Like,
I think what's different with it is it's a genuine, I can't explain it very well, as we've seen earlier. There's so much layers to this album that even as the writer, I have to try to keep up with it sometimes.
Without getting lost in the sauce, of course.
Yeah, so I think that this is a genuine concept album, where a lot of albums within the deathcore scene aren't concept albums, or if they claim to be, there's no substance actually to it when you read the lyrics and whatnot. It feels more like they just kind of wrote lyrics and then made up something happen for it, instead of consciously writing with an idea in mind. And don't get me wrong, I had plenty of that too, where it's like, I mean, I've had lots of times in my life where I might not write something and understand what I was trying to say, but it might make sense later and apply to something in life.
Yeah.
But for this, it was a very more and that, I'm sure that's going to happen a lot with this album too in the future. But at the time I wrote it with the concept of not believing in good and having absolutely a shit attitude about it, but finding it. So I feel like most deathcore albums are just the world's shit. I'm saying the world's shit, but what if? So I'd say that's what's a little different, as opposed to being a generic Hail Satan with none of them actually being Satanists, or if they are, it's just like not a real thing. It's like a hipster thing for them.
Right.
You can tell when you read their lyrics and shit, it's not real. So
now, of course, this podcast is not meant, composed, or recorded to be a show that outs bands or their albums, their records, anything like that. But maybe, perhaps, there are certain bands in the future who might listen to this session, and they might be like, you know what? That's fair. I can go ahead and improve upon that. Would you be willing...
like... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just going to ask if you would be willing to disclose some of those albums that you've listened to before that, of course, helped you build inspiration in other areas. And eventually that did help you climb the staircase, get those 11 tracks done, write Wrought In Eternity, and then push it to public domain, right? There are definitely albums I know that inspired you to do that. Were any of them in that category of, I mean, they're claiming to have a concept, but I don't think there is a continuous concept in this. Like, it doesn't, if there is a concept, it doesn't really hold itself on its feet. It doesn't stand its ground to me. Were there any records like that that ended up inspiring Wrought In Eternity? Or if there weren't, what are some records that you decided to try to be better by or try to be better about when it came to those themes, right? So maybe there were albums like, okay, well, as long as I don't write it like that record, and that's just constructive criticism, really. Were there any records that you could name that don't really have continuous concepts to you? And if so, why? Because this is not, I want this to be a situation to where you feel like you can be open about certain albums and not fear the possibly negative feedback of certain people like, oh, this is my favorite album of all time. It's like, well, everything's subject to opinion. It's all about perspective. But again, maybe that the band behind that album, they might be like, yeah, you know what? He was right. We can write way better than that. Like, what are some of those albums?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I could tell you concept albums that did inspire me, but because this was a really big concept thing, not to sound like a broken record, but none of those, I think it's more so the lack of in metal, not in metal, but in deathcore in particular. I can't even really think of many concept albums, and if they do, like I said, there's not much substance. Like, let's take an album I know that I love, but we've talked about Shrine of Malice Shul. Well, Shul is it's like the Hebrew version of hell. It's like the Jewish underworld. And it was kind of vaguely pitched sort of as this concept thing, but it never, when you read the lyrics, you can't tell what's happening at all, which I don't know. Like, there's not enough for me to really think of. They just don't seem to translate like other genres as a concept album I can take seriously. I know like Slice the Cake, Odyssey to the West is a really good example of a successful concept album, sort of within these realms. Distant supposedly is concept albums. I'm not particularly aware of what they are yet. They have like books you can buy on them and shit.
I have
but yeah, those could be really cool. I don't know, but yeah, I can't say particularly this album. I can tell you, like I said, concept albums to me that stand out and they're some of my favorite albums of all time and they usually aren't metal albums. Like Boys Night Out, Trainwreck is a standout to me. Any of the Mars Volta albums that are concept albums, Coheed and Cambria is a good example of concept, a whole universe done right. There's just no metal band that has there's tons of metal bands. There's not deathcore bands that I can think of that have genuine layers and depth that like Silent Hill level where it's almost like you could be talking about this thing in theories for years. Where is that album? It isn't there that I know of, and I'm sure it is out there and I just haven't heard it yet. But yeah, within deathcore, there's not a lot of substance to the stuff, I feel like.
What I can say is that Distant would be a really good example. After all, like whether it be between Aeons of Oblivion,
that's the one I like a lot.
All of those albums really going from, I would say, well, let's go ahead and look up Spotify because we've been in session for quite some time now. So naturally, I'm losing track of other information as we're trying to sustain conversation at this moment. That, and I'm just tired. I'm getting older, not old, but just older. So naturally, I'm just.
Oh yeah, I'm a worthless piece of shit. Just wait till you're like, look at Don. He can't look at. He's like 5 years older than me. Dude, fucking can't even. He's just there. He can't do anything anymore.
Right. So Tyrantophobia.
That's going to be you in 10 years.
Don't say that. Don't say that. I'm kidding.
I
love the
no, you
box.
can only strive to be a Don in 10 years. Life
Seriously.
goals.
Life goals, exactly. So I mean, with Distant, you have album Tarantophobia, Aeons of Oblivion,
Yeah.
and then that goes into Heritage. That's all contained really within one book. And I have the book. I haven't read through the entire thing, but at the very least, when you're able to compress the lore of all three of your most recent albums into a book, that's good shit. That's really good
Yeah.
shit. Like, kudos to them, you know?
That's like
and
Marilyn Manson shit. His
exactly,
old
dude.
stuff when he was actually good.
Fair. And being that I myself am a very avid, very thorough Shrine fan, of course I won't
Oh,
suck the
God,
dick
yeah.
of Sheol too much. Because it did end up branching from Malignance, and it was mainly just in regards to Beelzebub. Caesar Aldrian's depiction of Beelzebub, the three lords of hell. I mean, Z Lost in the Cold is a song about the boys themselves utilizing a Ouija board in a mansion, trying to make a pact with Beelzebub, and it going terribly fucking wrong. One of them ended up out in the desert, out in Vegas, and just passed out. And it was, well, Z Lost in the Cold, but Z also is in regards to Zozo. So they did that. And then, I mean, really the rest of the album is, I think, being that I've listened to it about 30 to 50 times by now, at least. Like, I've been listening to that album relentlessly since 2019. I've listened to their newer one that they still haven't released on their own terms, Oberith. I've listened to that at least like 20 times now, through like Russian social media websites. Like, and then they're writing a new EP as we speak, and they should be getting done with that here pretty soon. And then I'll actually be getting them on the show. I'm looking forward to that. Let's see. Sheol is just meant to talk about like hell. It's meant to talk about their more hellish life experiences, and most of the lyrical writing for that record, just like speaking on behalf of it, because I know everything there is to know. I've talked with them about it and everything. Sheol is basically a self-loathing bastardization for Greg at the time, because he was in a very, very dark place before everything happened. There was a lot of dark shit that happened, and therefore, like, for example, Kiss of the Wind. No, not Kiss of the Wind. What is it? Carnal Beast, right? So Carnal Beast is basically him breaking his character down to being a demon that was managed to be birthed through a human. Like, he was very self-loathing at the time, so therefore he depicted himself as a demonic entity that happened to be born from a human woman, and now he's just a stain, like he felt like a stain upon humanity at the time. And that's really most of the album. But like Tome of Hellfire, no, the Left Hand Path, that talks about a priest taking advantage of like 3 different nuns in the church and how shitty that is. Infernal Darkness, that's pretty self-explanatory. Voiceless is just talking about the middle class and how a lot of people for a long time have felt like they're just slaves to higher powers and shit, and how those higher powers just, well, they continue to want to enslave people. But we're not really here to do an under the skin session for Sheol, as much as I would love to do that. More or less what I'm trying to emphasize is that like there are at least a couple albums that I know about from bands that I've hosted, from bands that I've networked with, that have a pretty good amount of depth. I think Eternity, dude, if you haven't listened to our Under the Skin session for Eternity that we did back in December of 2022, but released January of 2023, actually right alongside our debut Invirulant session, which that was a good time. Yeah, that Under the Skin session for Eternity was like 2 hours. That was just the Under the Skin part, because the entire album talks about anxiety and shit. and like living in your own hell. Really, really like well written. DeAndre writ that shit really well. But needless to say, let's see, as far as questions and commentary we were providing, really.
Thanks for filling me in too with Shobe, because that was actually the one I cited as like, I obviously missed the boat on the concepts on that one because it kind of felt like it was supposed to be one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounds like it kind of is vaguely all tied, at least in concept a bit.
Yeah, of course. And of course, at the end of the day, I can fully admit that I am a Shrine simp, but it's because I've been very close to them since everything went wrong, and I know their side of the story. So as someone who refuses to separate the art from the artist, like, I support them on every level possible, both as a fan but also as a friend. And that's like, it's difficult sometimes to kind of bear that weight because there's a lot of people who would call me absolute scum for it. But what I can guarantee absolutely everybody who could be listening to this exact part in episode 73 of the Anatomy Podcast, in due time, people, in due time, I promise you that anybody who has supported them on the same level as me, but who has had this unwavering uncertainty, maybe you feel a knot in your stomach supporting the band, I can guarantee you that it is not in vain. And they are good people, but poor guys are smeared.
Did you get to catch up? I'm sure you've heard Obirith or Obirith, however you say it.
Oberith, yeah. Oberith. I've listened to that record like 20 times, and I've ironically too, no one's really supposed to know about this, but I mean, no one's going to be listening to this part of the podcast session, most likely. Or at least it's going to just fly over their heads. The outro song that I've been doing for the Sean Cross channel for all my thumbnail time lapses at the very end of my video, that's actually a good chunk of their new single. And I didn't even know about that for the longest time. So I've been unknowingly kind of just promoting one of their new singles this whole time. It's a pre.
They have new material.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
Because everyone thought they wouldn't be able to do it without Izzy. I don't know what it'll sound like, because I know Obirith, I did not like it as much as Shul. I'm gonna be honest. Because I got a leak from it. So I had it. I've had it for a few years. It's good, but it's not any Shul by any means, in my opinion.
That's fine. Yeah, that's
Chainbreaker goes pretty hard, but that's the single. Where's the rest of the album?
Postmortem Suicide is probably my favorite track off of the Oberith album, just because it reminds me of Hollow Socket so much, but it's even heavier. I have no idea if they're planning to release Oberith. I think they are, but like, I think they're also hesitant because it's already been leaked so much. It's like, well, fuck it, we might as well just write new material and move on. But I'm hoping they release it, because it would still be cool to hear all the songs that they work so hard on. But all in due time, I promise. I will be in the room with them. I will be in the same session with them, and we will talk about absolutely everything. I think chances are too, the same way that we did today, they'll have me in session when we listen to like the EP early on, and then just kind of discuss the future going on from there. I think they're at least making a 5 to 6 track EP this next go around, but I have no clue. So disclaimer, I don't really know anything about the new EP, but I know there is a new EP coming out eventually.
Dope.
So question 4 for part 2 out of 5. So we're nearly done, I promise. How and why did Wrought In Eternity become an album instead of an EP?
Specifically because Andrew wanted it to be a full length, because he has never done a full length. I've never done a full length. This is both our first. We both got the whole foot long fucking dick down by the Italian BMT, but he tried to release the last album as a full length, but technically it's like only like 18 minutes and 7 songs. So I would
Yeah.
classify it more as like a fat EP. But so he was like, I really want this to actually be a full length. So out of the sheer fact of wanting to have that notch in both of our belts, it was decided we would do it as a full length. Yeah.
Cool. Because, I mean, especially in recent times, I think it is good for the sake of culture. It is good for the sake of initiation for any band if they are to acquire a new vocalist. Because I think Lorna Shore, Lorna Shore with the And I Return to Nothingness EP with Will Ramos. That's one example. Two would be the, I'm going to have to look this up so I don't say it wrong. 1 second, boys. Last 10. Okay, so that no, not the Last Tycoon. So singles and EPs. Come on. I know you're in there. Okay, so two good examples to me of this process. I call it just the initiation process when you're acquiring a new vocalist. The biggest one, the most popular one, would be And I Return to Nothingness as an initiation EP for Will Ramos before they decided to do Pain Remains. Second example for me would be The Last 10 Seconds of Life when they departed with John the Butcher. Shout out to the homie. When they did the 4-track EP Disquisition on an Execution with Tyler Beam as an initiation EP before they went full length, right? They went full speed into No Name Graves. For me, I think it's really, really good for the sake of culture, participation, and that sense of initiation for any vocalist. If a band is acquiring a new vocalist, to go ahead and just record an EP, do that initiation, and then go into a full length. So that's really the main reason I decided to ask that question and kind of get your perspective on it, is because when a band's acquiring a new vocalist, it's just interesting to see like how they sample that vocalist and then how they take them into a full length. But as it was a request by the instrumentalist, the main songwriter, that makes complete sense. And it's really cool to know in the end, I think it really worked well as a full length record as opposed to a sample EP. So thank you for answering that question, Drake. We nearly conclude our podcast session tonight, episode 73. Now getting closer to 9 p.m. at night for me, most likely 11 p.m. for you, or getting closer to that over in Minnesota.
Yeah.
The question quotes as follows: briefly discuss the future, shout out any bands or people if applicable. So this really is the tail end of the Anatomy podcast, episode 73. Let's go ahead and hear anything you can tell us about the near future for currently what is, currently what is 145 monthly listeners on Spotify. We definitely want to provide them what is next, because of course, well, the Great Eternal Music Machine, it just continues fucking cranking. It doesn't stop, unfortunately. Or at least if you make a really good album, if you make a really good EP, you're making moves, you're making the moves in the right way, you're on a record label or something, you get that little delay, right? But you still want to prepare and just make sure that you have a roadmap ready to go. So what is that roadmap looking like right now? Oh, I didn't realize Drake left.
Did he?
He did. He's back though. Okay, where did we leave off, boss?
Dude. You were explaining the
No, you're
last
fine.
question.
Right. So more or less, what is the near future roadmap looking like for Parasitic Embodiment?
It's looking like probably try to do that next full length. Andrew moves really fast. Thankfully, that's been one nice thing about working with him, is I've never had one of those like kind of like Derek Ryan is with Envy, where he's just a machine, where he's constantly writing shit. That's kind of how Andrew is. He'll go through spurts where he'll write like 5 to 10 tracks within a couple weeks span. So There's always new stuff being worked on. There's also a spin-off. It's gonna be like an alien core deathcore thing. So that's another project with me and him on the horizon. And yeah, so basically for PE, we'll be pumping out probably more merch designs and stuff for this album cycle. Probably try to do some fun things like that. There's someone I need to talk to maybe about getting some patches made. And then for material itself, yeah, we're probably gonna try to, maybe we'll get into the single game, but we're, like I said, we're not super worried about kind of what people think. We're just kind of doing it because we want to for fun. So I like the legacy impact better of full lengths. So I think we will probably mostly be a full length band or EP. And at least if we do release singles, they will have a home eventually. I don't believe in these bands that, like, look at a band like Bound in Fear. Like, their number one song is God Fear, which is amazing because it's a single that never appeared on any album. That's a very, very rare occasion that actually happens that way. So within metal, at least, you know, pop singles, with rap, that's where it's at. But for metal, it's just never, it's trying to adopt that, but it's just people listening to metal, once you get past the surface, yeah, a lot of them have a short attention span, but the people who are really taking this stuff, like I said, in a legacy impact, long term, people are going to be talking about full length albums. They're not going to be talking about that single from 2018 that no one can remember, you know?
Right.
So
that's true. Okay. So you guys are already cranking for another full length record and you're wanting to do something on the side, a separate project that is indeed connected to Parasitic Embodiment, narratively speaking, but it isn't Parasitic Embodiment. Instead, it is something else. I would always encourage that for the sake of branding and for the sake of continuity. Maybe that just end up being a side EP or something that you guys end up composing, but
I might have misunderstood it. It's not narratively collected or connected. You might be thinking of Austerity of Amaya, which Andrew's not. That's completely different.
Okay.
That'll be coming out, but no, I smell what you're stepping in there. But yeah, so it'll be called Solar Serpent, and it's gonna be more of a shit core, like in kind of what he wanted PE to be. It's not gonna be super serious. It's gonna be very MySpace core-y and very fun and very fast and like a punch to the face.
Cool.
So,
I look forward to that. Well, Brandon, Pops, unless you had anything that you wanted to add as far as commentary, maybe something that you think kind of distinguishes Parasitic Embodiment from other artists on the CKB Records site and in that group, maybe something that you think will kind of help them poke out from the rest of the scene, and especially maybe they become one of those prevailing bands in Minnesota themselves, you know? Like, I don't know. Did you have any commentary regarding PE?
So what I was going to say is like, yeah, there's no good bands. And I'm like, dude, you are the good bands. What are you talking about?
The thing is Andrew isn't, he's from Maine. He's from, he's in Baltimore. This is an online thing, but we do want to meet up, like do a CKB fest or something someday, if that's ever a thing, or just in general. We do in like a year or two. We're probably not gonna be a touring band, but we would like to do some meet up and do a couple shows a year where it counts, I guess.
Yeah. Well, definitely count Blind Without Our Failures in on that CKB fest as well. That sounds fucking lit.
Dude, I need a CKB fest. I need you on it. I need Desoectomy. I need Envy. I need those two headlining it. I need Vile Revelation.
Yeah.
I need fucking
Magazine.
Isaiah's band, Muramasa. I need the whole nine.
Yeah. No, seriously. And I mean, in that case, it's kind of ironic to me that so quickly we're kind of doing a checklist as far as the CKB artists that are like, it's not a record label, but you know.
Sorry, the ones I missed. Those are the ones I listen to.
Yeah, it's a gang. It's a gang.
Yeah.
Pop said it's a gang, so it's a gang.
It's gonna be like Juggalos, but even more cringy and less successful. Clowns
No,
without
I
pain.
don't think you can get more cringy than Juggalos. I'm sorry. Like,
God bless them though. They got their whole universe. Now they're concept writers. They're they're the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, I guess suppose so. I haven't listened to any of the artists associated with the Juggalo Fest, but I know there have been a couple bands from our scene, like the death metal, deathcore scene, who have like ventured over there. I'm pretty sure, like, Necro Goblin.
They're cool.
On that note, that's something I'll say. It's going to be a big crossover because you're going to pull people from like SBDM community who will listen to it for the vocals, and then you're going to have people from the deathcore that listen to it for the music. So I think that's something that'll distinguish PE's or Wrought In Eternity.
Well, I doubt it with the SBDM elitists. They're never gonna. It's deathcore, so it's not allowed. But you know, that would be cool to become that within even the slam scenes. Like, you know, I hate that stuff except for Parasitic Embodiment. I wish I could become that cool kid in the circle where I'm like, even those nerds like me. They don't.
Manifest that shit.
They don't like me.
It's okay, man. We'll just help you manifest that shit. CKB on the rise, motherfucker.
No, I'm not real enough. I'm not raw enough.
Actually,
I'm trying too hard.
Nah. Well, dude, here's the thing. When you
seriously, when I try to do slamming brutal death metal stuff, I get carried away. I can't be those guys if I try.
No, because what you're doing here is very similar to what you're doing in NB. And anybody who likes you there is gonna like you here.
Yeah.
Basically, as far as I'm concerned, as a vocalist and as someone who is investing as much creatively as you are, it is the same thing as Dan Watson when he was doing Enterprise Earth and Meyer Lore at the same time. Same thing. Like,
I love Dan Watson so much.
I do too.
His vocals, I don't know him. His Facebook's wild. I haven't seen it in a while, but there was something I couldn't understand what he was saying. He's clearly trolling the universe, but he was on a different level than I could compute.
I mean, honestly, I think he was just not allowed to say that he wanted to leave Enterprise Earth because Gabe is a fucking dick. So he just left. He's like, I need to go on a spiritual retreat. I'm like, no, it's okay. I don't like Gabe either. And then he did Meyer Lore from that point on, and they're like, no hard feelings between us and Dan Watson. I'm like, no, that's a lie, and I know it is. So
well, what the deal with Dan too is he wouldn't get his COVID shot, I think. So then he one of them where he wouldn't go on tour. So yeah,
I mean, there's that too for sure.
Homie's marching to the beat of his own drum. That's a big no nowadays. So
not even like, I honestly these days I don't think people care enough to like actually harass people on live television regarding not getting the vaccines, because most of us ended up getting it anyways. And quite literally I know I did, and I fucking regret it. Like, because now you hear shit in certain places and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that there, bud. I fucked up there, bud. Like, we were all trying to do the right thing, and we are, as far as I'm concerned, we are peer pressured into being guinea pigs and shit. And it's fucked up, but oh well. What happened. And as far as I'm concerned, this is just my opinion. This is exclusively the opinion of Sean Cross. If people unsubscribe, I don't give a fuck. I applaud those who have still not gotten the vaccine these days, because you just saved yourself a whole bunch of health issues there, bud, potentially. But again, that is exclusively my opinion.
Which you're entitled to, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I feel the need to offer that disclaimer, because I do say a lot of out of pocket shit without saying, haha, just kidding.
Well, unfortunately, there's people that if you have an opinion one way or the other, you're garbage at that point. But if that's really where they're at, they're probably not someone you want to invest too much
Exactly.
into anyways. So
I'm testing the fucking coffee filter of my fan base right now. I'll tell you fucking what there, bud.
yeah, you get, clear out the weeds. They'll take care of themselves.
Exactly. I think that is a very authentic and heartfelt conclusion, though, to the Anatomy Podcast, episode 73, mainly promoting, endorsing, advocating for Parasitic Embodiment and their newest album that came out a week ago, which we were meaning to record a week ago, but I'm like, oh, let's postpone because I finally found a girlfriend. Yay!
Whoa, is that what happened? Go, Sean.
Yeah.
You dog.
Yes. Something like that. We ended up going camping. We camped in snow. Pops. We went to go camp in the snow up in fucking on the Mogollon Rim. It was like 23 degrees. It was
there you
bad.
go.
But ultimately from this point on, it's like, of course, for any bands who have yet to be hosted, need not worry. That was a brief vacation. There will not be any postponings from this point on because I still want to conquer that 144 episodes just in 2024, motherfuckers. We're going to make it happen. But as I say over on Sean Cross, like the great eternal music machine, people, let's keep cranking. And well, speaking for the Anatomy Podcast, we will see you guys most likely in episode 74 with the Voynich code. But for the sake of reschedulings, not done by myself, we'll see you next time. Is there anything you boys wanted to say before we go ahead and kill session tonight?
Thank you very much for having us out, Sean, and making it happen. I'm really happy we did this. It was a cool experience. Thank you for picking my brain and making me have to think about stuff that I did. Because sometimes I don't until someone points it out to me. So, thank you to anyone who checked out the album. We decided not to slam worldwide this release and go organic. And as he did with the first album, and we are at, I don't know what it was. It was over 2,000 views. Ooh. And we're at the 8-day mark. And for basically no sponsorship, no label, no promo. I know that number is a joke to some people, but that means to me people are listening to it on its own merits. At least 2,000 people. We got our viewers, our counts going up between Spotify and everything else. And what I'm getting at, I'm not trying to toot my horn. I'm saying I'm surprised, and it validates the work I put in and makes me go, oh, like, my shit doesn't suck. People like it. So, and that's always a good feeling. Yeah, like somebody's sharing it with their homies for one reason or another, and that's why it's getting spread around. I don't think it's because we sound like Attila or for a bad reason or anything, but yeah. So even though Attila fucking slaps, you know what I mean?
Attila does slap. Their newer shit doesn't slap, not really, but I'm hoping they release another full length that isn't just.
I think it all sucks, but Franz is such a character where, like, when you listen to him sometimes in person, you're like, dude, it's all a bit, like riffraff. Like Franz is he's just a dude.
Yeah, he's just a dude. He's just one of the boys.
It's hilarious.
He's one of the Florida local. No, they're Georgia, aren't they?
I don't know what they are. But those dudes earned it, man. They fucking grinded hard for years.
They did. Yeah. Well, shout out to them, and we will see you guys next time.
Peace.
Boop. Bye.